Chapter 527. Your Majesty, there are 2 more days before the deadline of 30 days is up. Before that, I'm going back. Do you want to relax? Runbachian asked as he stood beside the Empress. The war would begin in 2 days. Shiwanya had already begun his preparations, and all the soldiers in Jiangbei City were making their final preparations. The atmosphere in Jiangbei City was tense before the war. Rinbachian was only in charge of the rearguard commandery and monitoring every move in the northern part of Tianjing Basin. However, after the war, he wouldn't be able to be as idle as he was now. The same went for the Empress. All right. The Empress nodded. A moment later, the 2 of them appeared in Rinbachian's room. The Empress went back to her room to change. Rinbachian turned to look at the gloomy sky outside the window and remembered that another year was about to pass. He picked up his phone to look at the date and was surprised to find that it was December 31st, the last day of 2019. After today, it would be 2020. The first time he came to Dayo was in the summer of 2017. More than 2 years had passed on Earth in such a short time, to the point that he was somewhat detached from the timeline on Earth. Other than checking the news every time he came back to understand the current situation, almost all his thoughts were on that world. After being in a daze for a while, Runbachian heard someone shouting outside the window. He walked to the window and looked down, only to see a winged cavalry warrior practicing boxing on the ground outside. There was originally a lawn, but it had already become a piece of soil that had been plowed hundreds of times. Just a handful of seeds could be used to grow vegetables. The winged cavalry warrior's feet stepped on the soil, creating 2 deep ditches. When he stepped on the ground, the soil under his feet rushed up like water. Huh. Runbachian looked at a person not far away who was clumsily imitating the winged cavalry warrior's movements. That tutor? What's his name again? Runbachian thought for a while but couldn't remember. After looking out the window for a while, Runbachian heard footsteps heading downstairs and turned to open the door. Your Majesty. Runbachian walked to the top of the stairs and heard the voices downstairs. He said as he walked, "Call me Big Boss here." He then asked, "What's the name of your teacher?" Bean Sprout. Runbachian was confused. Was that his name? I saw him learning boxing outside. Runbachian asked casually. That day, there was no more wine. After drinking with him, Yen Yong said that he would teach him a fist technique. However, it was not a fist technique from the army. It was from their stronghold. If Sir Ren feels that it's inappropriate. The winged cavalry warrior scratched his head awkwardly and didn't continue speaking. After all, he had already said it, so he couldn't go back on his word. So be it. Just remember what you can say and what you can't, Runbachian said as he walked over and sat beside the Empress. He switched on the television to watch the news. In the end, the moment the television was switched on, the Empress snatched the remote control away and switched it to a television series. If an ordinary person were to learn the fist technique of our race, they would not be able to replenish their blood and chi after a long time. The faster they learn, the faster they die, the Water Empress said coldly. She naturally knew more about martial arts and the physical condition of ordinary people on Earth than these ordinary winged cavalry warriors. The winged cavalry warriors were shocked. Sir Run, I'll ask them to stop right away. They didn't have a bad impression of this Bean Sprout. There's no hurry. Runbachian stopped him. He first asked Duan what they had learned over the past few days. After listening, Runbachian was satisfied. This tutor came every day mainly to tell them about the news and answer their various questions. This was better than the force-feeding method. At the very least, these winged cavalry warriors had learned a lot of basic knowledge. Subsequently, one of them went out and called the other 2 back. Your Majesty. The winged cavalry warrior in front cupped his fists and greeted the Empress as soon as he returned. It's Big Boss. Runbachian added. Go and do your own things, the Empress said coldly. With so many people around, it was a little unsightly. In particular, that bastard in front was blocking the television. Mr. Ren. Ding Jie didn't see Runbachian when he came in. He first saw the lady in red on the sofa, and his heart immediately thumped. He didn't expect there to be such a beautiful person in this world. She was much more beautiful than those celebrities on TV. He didn't even hear what the others were saying. Fortunately, he woke up very quickly. After all, the Empress gave off a very cold vibe, and the majesty of her body made him feel a little afraid. You have done well these days, Rinpoche praised. After all, you have to be worthy of my salary. Ding Jie smiled bashfully. This kind of praise was a very important affirmation to him. Sometimes, when a big shot praised an ordinary person, that ordinary person would be happy for a few days. To him, Rinpoche was that big shot. Yin Yong said that I shouldn't be in charge of teaching you this boxing technique, but you don't have to learn it, Rinpoche said while looking at Ding Jie's expression. Ding Jie looked disappointed when he heard that. After all, he wanted to be like these people. Every boy had the dream of becoming a hero. However, Rinpoche's words destroyed this path. However, he also knew that he was already taking advantage of such a high salary. Therefore, after feeling disappointed, he quickly felt relieved. Rinpoche was satisfied when he saw his relieved expression. An idea popped up in his mind and he asked, "Do you want to work for me?" He also lacked a few people who could take care of everything on earth. He didn't attach much importance to ability, because he could find all kinds of capable people. As long as he showed some interest, the nation would definitely find some people to work for him. These people were very capable, but they weren't his people. He needed people who could listen to him, and had nothing to do with the nation. The little guy in front of him, whom he had found on the spur of the moment, seemed to have a simple temperament, and could be used by him. Isn't it now? Ding Jie didn't quite understand what he meant. From now on, you will always work for me. This includes when you are in university, after you graduate, and until you die, Rinpoche said faintly. Huh. Ding Jie's eyes widened, and he couldn't believe what he heard. My identity is a little special, so once you get on my boat, you can't get off. If you want to get off, you can only die. However, if you work for me, you can get what you want. Money, status, and how much you can get depends on your ability and how loyal you are, Rinpoche said faintly. Ding Jie was a little confused. Rinpoche's words were a little too distant for him. Before today, he didn't expect to encounter such a thing. Mr. Ren. Ding Jie was a little dumbfounded, and didn't know how to continue speaking. You can go aside and think about it, Rinpoche said. Then Ding Jie really went to the side to think about it. Rinpoche smiled and thought that this little guy was quite honest. The Empress glanced at Ding Jie, and didn't see why this little guy was worth Rinpoche's attention. She then continued to watch her television. Mr. Run, why me? Ding Jie ran over to ask Rinpoche after a while. He felt that he wasn't outstanding and had only been a tutor a few times. Although he didn't understand Ding Jie, he could tell that he was very rich. Such a rich person could find any kind of person he wanted, right? Because your identity is clean. Rinpoche looked at him and said, "A clean identity is the most important thing to me." Ding Jie didn't understand what Rinpoche meant and asked cautiously, "Will I break the law?" "No. Don't forget my identity. I never break the law," Rinpoche said. "But someone came to look for me a few days ago," Ding Jie whispered. Rinpoche's expression turned cold when he heard this. Who was it? What did they say? Ding Jie then recounted what happened that day. At that time, he was just too stubborn and didn't say anything. The other party didn't make things too difficult for him. They only gave him their phone number and promised him some things. Of course, there were also threats. After all, the other party was from the security department, and Ding Jie was just an ordinary student from the countryside. They were confident that even if Ding Jie didn't agree, he wouldn't say anything. After all, he was just a tutor. They didn't expect Ding Jie to betray them. After listening, Rinpoche picked up the phone beside him and called Yang Sr. "Your people have crossed the line. My concessions are limited." Yang Sun was a little confused on the other end of the phone. What happened? Rinpoche recounted the incident in a very cold voice and said, "Don't tell me that you don't know about this and that it was done by a temporary worker." Since he made a deal with the nation, he had given a lot of things to the nation, but the nation had given him very little in return. The things that both parties had given had always been unequal. He didn't care about these things. After all, he had other requests. Besides, he had been playing his part now. Other than Wang Ji courting death, he hadn't caused any trouble. Even so, there were still people who did this. This was simply challenging his tolerance. Mr. Run, calm down first. I really don't know much about this matter. What do those two people look like? What are their names? What's their phone number? Yang Sun was sweating a little. He could hear the anger in Ren Baqian's cold voice. He didn't want to provoke this person. Although he was backed by the nation, the other party had something that even the nation coveted. Furthermore, he also had a paradise behind him. Putting everything else aside, as long as a group of experts came over, Shanghai would be in chaos. Even if the nation could deal with them, many people would lose their lives and lose the opportunity to obtain things from them. No one could bear the consequences of such a thing. After asking Ding Jie, Ren Baqian told Yang Sun and said coldly, "You have to give me an explanation for this matter." Then he hung up the phone and sat there without saying a word. He wondered if Yang Sun really didn't know about this matter, or if he was just pretending. Now it all depended on what explanation he had to give. Ding Jie shrank his head like a quail. The cold aura of the person in front of him made him feel fear from the bottom of his heart. After an hour, Yang Sun called back and said, "Mr. Ren, I have found them. They aren't my people. They were instructed by someone else." Ren Baqian asked coldly. "Mr. Ren, I can't tell you who is behind this. You can imagine some situations. There are always people who have their own ideas and do things that harm both parties. I'll report this matter to my superiors and give you an explanation. I promise that I will never do such a thing." Ren Baqian's expression softened a little and said, "I want to see an explanation and at least some sincerity. I also want to guarantee that such a thing won't happen again. Otherwise, I don't think I need to say more. At least for this period of time, our cooperation will be temporarily suspended." After speaking, Ren Baqian put down the phone. In this world, there were always people who wouldn't shed tears until they saw the coffin. If he didn't cut off this claw, another claw would reach out very quickly. After a while, Ren Baqian looked at Ding Jie and said, "Well done. I can tell you that as long as you do your job, no one can do anything to you. What's your decision?" Although Ding Jie didn't know what the person on the other side of the phone said, he could imagine it after listening to Ren Baqian's words. In addition, the power that Ren Baqian exuded when he spoke made Ding Jie's heart burn. Chapter 528. Mr. Ren, what are you going to do? At this moment, Yang Sun was in a terrible fix. The previous matter hadn't been resolved. Even though the higher-ups were very angry after hearing his report, some people really didn't care about the big picture. However, they found out that the person was of high status. Furthermore, the other party wasn't just one person, but an entire faction. Therefore, it wasn't that easy to deal with him. At this time, there was news that Ren Baqian had booked a plane ticket to Africa. Yang Sun was stunned when he heard this news. What was he going to do? What was he going to do in Africa? Instead of guessing, it was better to give Ren Baqian a call and ask him directly. That was how the above sentence came about. Travel. Recently, I've been very interested in how giraffes mate. You won't stop me, right? Or do you think I'll run away? Don't worry, I'll wait for an explanation. Ren Baqian smiled casually and put his phone in his pocket. At this time, he and the Empress had already arrived at Pudong Airport. The Empress was dressed in red and wore sunglasses. On the other hand, Ren Baqian was wearing an ordinary jacket and jeans. He was carrying a small bag. The two of them mixed in the crowd and didn't attract much attention. However, there was an empty space around them, which could be seen after careful observation from afar. As the two of them moved forward, everyone would subconsciously make way for them and stay away from them. This kind of small trick was the Empress's specialty. More than 20 hours later, the two of them appeared in a hot country, Congo. However, Ren Baqian's target wasn't here, but the country next to Congo, Central Africa, one of the most chaotic countries in the world. It was also one of the countries with the most firearms. It was said that a grenade cost only $1, which was cheaper than cola. This time, Ren Baqian was prepared to bring back a batch of grenades. Although their lethality was average, They were very effective in breaking the enemy's formation. Furthermore, the explosion of grenades could easily cause panic in the enemy, especially when most of them were new soldiers with poor adaptability. This kind of weapon, which was completely unknown to them, would be very effective. Unfortunately, he couldn't go back on his words since he had already said that he would temporarily suspend the contract. That would make people look down on him. After a brief search on the internet, Runbachian set his target here. It wasn't just for this batch of grenades, but also to find a way to contact some firearms dealers. After all, there were many powerful equipment that the country had been unwilling to give up due to various concerns. If it was just for weapons, there was actually a better place, an organization in the southern part of Turkey. After all, they were old friends. Even if they weren't friends in the past, they would be friends again this time. If he went again, it would be the second time. However, the Empress wanted to see a giraffe. She was very interested in animals with long necks after watching an episode of Animal World. Due to the aforementioned reasons, the two of them ended up here. Things went smoother than Runbachian had expected. With the help of his handgun and fists, it only took him half a day to find the person he was looking for in the Congo. It was a small arms smuggler. The gist of the story was that the guns were pointed at the heads of the hooligans, the gang members, the gang bosses, and the arms smugglers. That was the gist of it. A day and a half later, Runbachian parked his car on the prairie. In the distance, a few giraffes were slowly pacing and occasionally approaching each other tenderly. However, there were also some surprises. For example, one of them was riding on the back of the other, and doing something indescribable with words. Runbachian laughed and quickly took out his phone to take a picture. This was a very rare sight. One had to know that giraffes were known for premature ejaculation, and a battle would end in less than 60 seconds. He just said it casually and didn't expect to actually see it. His mouth had been blessed recently. The Empress blushed slightly. She was especially angry when she heard Runbachian's mischievous laughter. She stretched out her hand and threw Runbachian out of the car. He flew in an arc and landed beside a few giraffes, scaring them away. Ah! Runbachian let out a long scream in the air. His voice was not so much panic as mockery, which made the Empress even more angry. The Empress looked at the giraffes that were running away in all directions, flashed, and landed on the back of one of them. No creature naturally liked to be ridden, even a gentle animal like a giraffe. After a blood-soaked battle, the giraffe gave in and carried the satisfied Empress on its back to let loose on the African savanna. From this incident, Runbachian learned a principle. Money wasn't omnipotent. At least, giraffes didn't recognize money. However, force was omnipotent. It was universal no matter the time. It didn't matter if the target was a chihuahua or a human. Runbachian followed the giraffe in his car, while posting the pictures he had taken to his WeChat moments. At the same time, he observed how the Empress communicated with the giraffe. When it wanted to turn left, the Empress would say left, and slap the giraffe's right neck. The giraffe's entire body tilted to the left. The opposite was also true. After such a long time, this giraffe was miraculously full of spirituality. When the Empress pointed to the east, it wouldn't go west. When the Empress asked it to chase a dog, it wouldn't chase a chicken. Runbachian took out his phone and took a picture of this scene. A giraffe carried a lady in red and ran wildly on the prairie. It was full of harmony between man and nature, and the warmth between man and animal. The Empress's mood came and went quickly. After playing for about half a day, she returned to the car and said, "Let's go back." As soon as she left, the giraffe that was happily with her ran away as if it was running for its life. Runbachian chuckled and showed her the picture of the Empress riding on the giraffe. He praised, "Very beautiful. Beautiful as a fairy." The Empress was in a good mood and wrinkled her nose. She would only reveal such a girly expression in front of Runbachian when she was in a good mood. Then her face turned cold and she asked, "Who's a fairy?" Runbachian was speechless. Half a day later, the two of them returned with 1,500 made iron grenades. In China's 82-2 grenades returned to Dayo. The sky was already dark. Two galaxies hung in the sky like a cross. "I still feel that Dayo's sky is more beautiful," the Empress said as she looked up. It's the same principle as when one's own son is better, Rinpoche added. Bang! The Empress slapped Rinpoche to the wall and returned to her house with a cold look. This damned bastard was getting more and more unbridled recently. Sometimes his words were extremely touching and sometimes infuriating. Sooner or later, he would be hung on the city wall. Rinpoche fell from the wall. He stretched his lower back before smiling at the Empress and said, "Your Majesty, rest early." After which, he asked the guards to place the grenades in an empty house. With his hands behind his back, he strolled back to his room with a smile on his face. Sometimes it was good to tease the Empress. Chapter 529. Rinpoche opened his eyes and looked at the white sky outside the window. He was in a daze for a moment before muttering, "It's time." 30 days had passed. These days, there were no more martial artists coming from the south. Either they were determined to rebel, or they were blocked outside the Wang Estuary and Ghost Ridge, unable to come over. Either way, their fates were sealed. Leave no one alive. None of the practitioners from the south who were above the man-will level were spared. All the sects were massacred. I really don't want to kill so many people. In front of me, blood flows like a river, and the river water is dyed red. However, karma is self-determined. You reap what you sow. This is the path you've chosen. Even if you have to kneel, you can walk it to the end. All I can do is send all of you on your way, Rinpoche muttered to himself. Rinpoche put on his official robe and walked out of the room with a serious look on his face. The humid morning air directly hit his face. The air in Jiangbei City seemed to have condensed today. In the past, one could hear a lot of sounds at this time, but at this time, it was silent. The entire Jiangbei City was filled with killing intent. Even the mosquitoes could feel the killing intent. When he walked to the Empress's room, Shiwanya, Zhongshen, Gongzheng, and the others were already standing there. Rinpoche cupped his hands and stood opposite Shiwanya. Soft voices could be heard from the Empress's room. He waited for a long time, but the Empress didn't come out. All the women in the world, even someone as beautiful as Your Majesty, have to dress up before going out. It has nothing to do with beauty or ugliness. This is instinct. Rinpoche smiled at Shiwanya. Shiwanya's face immediately darkened. You dare to say that, but we don't dare to listen. Bang! An object smashed through the window and smashed onto Shiwanya's head. Shiwanya was able to dodge it, but he was still hit by it, and had an innocent expression on his face. Zhongshen and Gongzheng looked straight ahead, as if they didn't see anything. Rinpoche pursed his lips and didn't say anything else. He felt that the Empress had never used anything to smash him, which clearly showed her sincerity towards him. Although there was no need to doubt this, he still felt very warm in his heart. Especially before the big battle. A warm feeling flowed through his heart. After a short while, the door was pushed open from the inside. The Empress was standing there, her red muslin swaying along with the airflow caused by the door opening. Your Majesty, it's time for the 30-day agreement. Rinpoche cupped his hands and said in a deep voice. Your Majesty, everyone in the Protectorate of the South has packed up and is ready to quell the rebellion. Shiwanya cupped his fists and reported. Your Majesty, the winged cavalry is ready to follow Your Majesty's gaze and tear apart any enemy who dares to stand in your way. Gongzheng also said. Let's go. The Empress ordered coldly. Yes. A moment later, 3 bleak sounds of the beast's horn resounded in the city. Following that, the gates of the 2 barracks in the south and north of the city opened wide. Many soldiers filed out of the barracks, crossed the main road in the city, and exited through the south gate. In the early morning, the only sound in Jiangbei City was the heavy footsteps that seemed to step on everyone's heart, as well as the occasional sound of weapons colliding. In the entire Jiangbei City, everyone was behind the windows, looking at the army that was leaving the city through the gaps. Bring her along. Rinpoche passed by Wang Baobao's courtyard, pointed inside, and instructed the guard. Get someone to bring Xing Ruo over. Also wake Lin Qiala up. If she continues to sleep, she will grow hair, Rinpoche instructed. Not long after, the little monk Xing Ruo appeared in front of Rinpoche. Arhat. Xing Ruo calmly put his palms together without any joy or worry. Rinpoche sized him up. In less than half a month, Xing Ruo already looked like a decent person. Previously, Ren Baqian had learned some news from the people who were following and protecting Xing Ruo. Given Xing Ruo's age, it was hard to trust him. In particular, Buddhism had never appeared in this land, and the people didn't know anything about it. However, perhaps due to the recent chaos and the aboriginals taking over the city, the commoners in the city were filled with fear and confusion about the future. Under such circumstances, Xing Ruo had attracted some commoners these days. There weren't many of them, only a few dozen. However, this was already a big step for Xing Ruo. At his age, it wasn't easy to attract a few dozen people to listen to him preach about Buddhism. We are about to set off. Are you coming with us? Ren Baqian asked faintly. No, the commoners in this city also need the protection of Buddhism. Xing Ruo shook his head and replied softly. You will have to rely on yourself in the future, Ren Baqian said. Xing Ruo nodded gently. Then he raised his head and said pitifully, Arhut, please give me some money. You are just a monk. What use do you have for money? Ren Baqian was amused by Xing Ruo's change in attitude. Previously he was still acting like a proper person, but now he was acting like a thief. Have you practiced face changing before? I have to find someone to carve the statue of Buddha first. Otherwise, these people won't know what Buddha looks like and who they are worshipping. Xing Ruo said truthfully. I have even drawn the image of Buddha. As he spoke, he took out a piece of paper from his pocket. Ren Baqian glanced at it and thought, not bad. If I carve it according to this, they won't know who they are worshipping. Ren Baqian asked someone to take some silver and give it to Xing Ruo. Xing Ruo happily took the silver and found someone to carve the statue. After Ren Baqian left, he didn't seem to think about promoting Buddhism here alone. Ren Baqian didn't see any worry on his face. He called for the two practitioners who had been following and protecting Xing Ruo. You don't have to secretly protect him in the future. Shave your heads and convert to Buddhism, Ren Baqian said as he looked at the two men below. Both of them were stunned. In the future, if someone comes looking for trouble with Xing Ruo, the two of you will handle it. If Xing Ruo comes looking for trouble with others, the two of you will handle it. As for your sect, I'll send someone to inform you. After a few years, when things have settled down here, you can go back. At that time, you can enter the rearguard commandery. Let someone report to me, and I will arrange a position for you, Ren Baqian said directly, not giving the two a chance to refuse. After he finished speaking, he personally picked up a knife from the side and shaved their heads clean. Two monks with bloody heads were fresh out of the oven. They grimaced in pain but didn't dare to resist. Go, Ren Baqian said. The two bowed their heads and retreated. Fortunately, Ren Baqian promised to personally arrange jobs for them in the rearguard commandery after their mission, which gave them some hope. After arranging everything, Ren Baqian walked out of the door and saw Lin Xiaola leaning against the wall, yawning. There was a moldy smell on her body. The guards in the residence had also packed up their things. Where's Her Majesty? Ren Baqian asked. She has already left. Set off, Ren Baqian ordered. When he left the residence, there were still some people standing by the roadside waiting for him. The people from the rearguard commandery who were still in the city consciously followed him and set off. There were more than 200 people gathered together. Not far away, Zuocheng and Qingyan Sword stood on the roof with the people from the hidden village and nodded at Ren Baqian. Then dozens of figures leaped from rooftop to rooftop and left. These people didn't belong to the rearguard commandery, but they wouldn't stay far away from Ren Baqian. In fact, they would even listen to Ren Baqian's instructions at certain times. They were considered a group of people with relatively special identities. After Ren Baqian set off, the rest of the practitioners finally heaved a sigh of relief. These days, they almost didn't dare to breathe here. Now these people had finally left and seemed to have forgotten about them. They hoped that Ren Baqian would forget about them forever. Chapter 530. The Aboriginal army took a day to stop and set up camp 5 kilometers north of the Wang estuary. The place where everyone stopped was a hill, and in front of them was a dense forest. On both sides of the road were trees that were several feet tall, and a person could wrap their arms around them. There was only a 4-meter-wide dirt road that passed through the forest, and at the end of the road were 2 tall mountains in the distance. Renbaqian met Zuocheng and the others as soon as he arrived. How was it? Was the trip successful? What about the others? Renbaqian asked. Thanks to these items, we were able to find out information about the other party from a distance. We mainly investigated at night, and with the night vision devices, we were able to easily discover the other party's hidden sentries. Although we were detected twice during this period, we retreated ahead of time and didn't even encounter them. Zuocheng smiled. These binoculars and night vision devices were really useful. In particular, the infrared night vision devices were extremely useful in the jungle at night. Furthermore, they could easily find out the approximate number of people within a certain distance, which reduced the danger of this investigation. In addition, the Empress had killed the 2 spirit wheel experts, so they didn't encounter any danger. As for the others, they are still monitoring the other party's movements. We will come back first to report the news to you. It's good that everything went smoothly. Renbaqian nodded. What's the situation ahead? Zuocheng took out a hand-drawn map. On it was an abstract forest and 2 tall mountains, and various roads were indicated. On the mountain, there were many points marked on it. Zuocheng explained to Renbaqian while holding the map. Sir, there aren't any ambushes in the forest. The other party is all on the mountain ahead. To bypass the mountain and reach the Wang estuary, they need to go through a mountain road that is about 6 steps wide. On both sides of the road are steep slopes. This road has a total of 2,600 steps. After this road, they will pass through the gap between 2 mountains. On the right side is a steep slope, but on the left side is a cliff that is 300 meters high. If they fall, they will be smashed to pieces. Along the way, they have piled up a lot of boulders and broken wood on both sides of the steep slopes. When the army passes through, they will push these boulders and broken wood down. In addition, there are 8,000 soldiers on the mountain, many of whom are archers. In addition, there are more than 70 earth wheel experts and nearly 1,000 man wheel experts from various sects and the army. As for the spirit wheel experts, I haven't seen them. If we attack by force, I'm afraid there will be many casualties. Renbaqian muttered to himself for a while. It was more or less what he had expected. As long as one wasn't an idiot, they would be able to come up with this method of rolling wood and stones. It was mainly because the 2 mountains in front of them had gentle slopes towards the south, while the mountains in front of them were all steep slopes. It would be easy for the other party to ascend the mountain from the other side, but it would be troublesome for everyone to ascend the mountain from this direction. Only the winged cavalry could do it. By the time the winged cavalry expended a lot of effort to climb up, what awaited them were numerous earth wheel and man wheel experts, as well as thousands of soldiers. He was afraid that the winged cavalry would only exist in name after this battle. Renbaqian pondered for a while before bringing this map to look for the Empress. Moments later, Shiwanya, Zongshen, the generals of the Protectorate of the South, and Gongzheng all received the news and rushed to the vicinity of the Empress's imperial carriage. Renbaqian drew a map on the ground that the people from the rearguard commandery had investigated, marked the locations, and explained everything that they knew so far. The Empress then asked, "What do you think?" The Empress rarely expressed her opinions on these matters. It had always been one of her strengths to hand over professional matters to others. "I will first take the experts from the army up the mountain and occupy an open space. The winged cavalry can ascend from there. With me leading the way, the other party definitely won't be able to stop us. When the winged cavalry and the soldiers ascend the mountain, we will be able to drive them away in one fell swoop," Shiwanya said. Renbaqian nodded slightly. If they encountered such a situation on Earth, it would indeed be more difficult. However, they were in Deo at this time, and the most prominent feature here was their superior individual strength. Although the Aboriginals didn't have the advantage in terms of military strength, they had the absolute advantage in terms of experts. With Shiwanya, Zongshen, Qingping, and other Cardinal Heaven experts ascending the mountain, they would be able to resist the attack of the other party and clear an open space. After that, the winged cavalry and the soldiers from the Protectorate of the South would ascend the mountain. Although Renbaqian felt that the other party wouldn't have thought of this, This method was the simplest and most practical. It was to break through everything with brute force. No matter what the other party's plans were, they would crush them with absolute brute force. That's settled then. The Empress nodded. That night, just as Renbachian went to rest, someone came to report that there was movement on the mountain. A moment later, someone came to report that many of the other party's practitioners had already descended the mountain and were rushing toward the place where the army had set up camp. Only the practitioners? Renbachian asked. After receiving an affirmative answer, he asked a guard to inform Shiwanya. If he guessed correctly, since there were only practitioners, it definitely wasn't a real night attack. After thinking for a while, Renbachian said to the guard, "If they really attack, remember to bring me to Her Majesty. As long as you don't see them, don't worry about me." After he finished speaking, he found 2 rags to plug his ears and went to sleep. After Renbachian fell asleep, a series of battle cries could be heard coming from the forest just after midnight. Countless figures rushed out of the forest and threw all kinds of hidden weapons at the barracks. There were darts, flying knives, gold beads, and silver beads. These people had just come out of the forest, but before they could reach the camp, hundreds of burly men jumped out from behind the fence and gave them a good beating. Retreat! Seeing this situation, the other party immediately shouted. Hundreds of corpses were left outside the camp while the others retreated into the forest. There's no need to chase. Gongzheng stopped the winged cavalry from continuing the chase. After a while, peace was restored in the camp. In the forest, dozens of people gathered together and said, "They are prepared. It seems like they have hidden sentries in the forest. What should we do now? Let's go back. Since they are prepared, continuing will only harm their lives," someone said. "No, let's go again. They know that this time, there should be hidden sentries who tipped them off. If we go back again, we will definitely be able to surprise them." "That's right. Even if we can't hurt them, we can make them unable to rest and attack tomorrow. The longer they stop, the greater the pressure on their rations." Someone agreed from the side. Then, everyone's gaze fell on the person in the seat of honor. "Let's rest for 2 hours before disturbing the enemy." Renbachian was sleeping soundly when he was shaken awake. In his dream, he was whispering sweet nothings to the Empress, which made him feel uneasy. However, he was woken up at this time and was immediately furious. Have they attacked? They didn't attack. However, there is news that they are resting in the forest, the guard hurriedly said. Inform General Shi that there will be another night attack in a while. Renbachian mumbled and went back to his dream to whisper sweet nothings to the Empress. During these 2 hours, the forest was quiet, and even the birds and beasts didn't make any noise. "Time's up. Set off. Remember, disturb the enemy, don't fight them," someone in the forest ordered. Then a group of people rushed out of the forest again, and a wave of battle cries could be heard in the camp. Hundreds of sleep-deprived burly men jumped out of the fence and gave them another beating. Another 200 corpses were left behind, and everyone retreated into the forest with resentment. They are obviously prepared. There is no chance for us to attack tonight. Let's go back. As the ancients said, you can do it once, twice, but not thrice. Anything can be done once or twice, but definitely not a third time. I believe the other party thinks so too. They must have hidden sentries in the forest. If we continue to stay here, their every move will be detected. We can let some people go back first and deliberately make the noise a little louder to create the illusion that we have all left. The forest is so dark that we can't even see our fingers. I don't believe that they will know that there are still people here. After a while, 300 to 400 people left the forest with a loud noise. Inform Sir that there are still about half of them in the forest. I'm afraid that they still haven't given up their evil intentions. A person on a tree branch in the distance said as he looked at the red dot in the distance with a night vision goggles. 2 hours later, hundreds of people rushed out of the forest. Darts, flying knives, golden marbles, silver marbles, and a lot of hidden weapons were thrown at the military camp in front as if they were free. Battle cries soared to the sky. In the darkness, no one could figure out how many people were attacking. Chapter 531. Renbachian opened his eyes and was a little annoyed. He was fully prepared for this night, but he still didn't sleep well. Anyone who was woken up every 2 hours would not be able to sleep well. Renbachian yawned as he walked out of the tent. He casually asked the guard, "How was last night?" "The enemy came to harass us 3 times and left behind 400 corpses. The people from the rearguard commandery have examined the corpses. 11 of them were earthwheel experts and the rest were manwheel experts," the guard said loudly. Renbachian didn't expect the enemy to send a wave of heads before he could even attack. He was originally worried that there were too many experts on the other side of the mountain. In the end, nearly 1,000 manwheel experts were killed just like that. Did the enemy's higher-ups have an insider? Renbachian called for Zhuocheng and asked in surprise, "Did some of the people we sent to the south to persuade them to surrender sneak into the enemy's ranks?" Zhuocheng was a little puzzled as he didn't know why Renbachian asked this question. He answered truthfully, "Sir, I'm not sure about this. No one left a note or anything like that, and I have no way of knowing the internal situation of the enemy." "Oh, you may leave then." Renbachian dismissed Zhuocheng and went to see the Empress. After breakfast, Shiwanya sent a portion of the soldiers from the Protectorate of the South to open up a path in the dense forest ahead. They had to at least double the current mountain road and open up an open space. For an entire day, as the towering trees fell with a loud rumble, bundles of vines were brought back from the forest, and some people weaved them into ropes. These ropes were as thick as an arm and were very strong. They wouldn't break even if they were to bear a weight of 500 kilograms. The only problem was that they were too heavy. After all, these weren't hay, but vines filled with water. A rope that was 100 meters long would weigh at least 300 kilograms. After removing the gentle slope that was more than 100 meters long, the remaining mountain wall that was difficult to climb was at least 300 meters high. This meant that a rope would weigh more than 500 kilograms. Even the winged cavalry could carry this thing and walk as if they were flying. However, only a few cardinal heaven experts like Shiwanya and Zongshin would be able to carry this thing up a mountain that was close to a vertical cliff without affecting their movements. On the morning of the 3rd day, the army set off again, passing through the forest and arriving at the foot of the 2 mountain peaks. Renbachian raised his head and looked up with his binoculars. He saw that the mountainside, which was 400 to 500 meters high, was filled with piles of rocks, rolling logs, and other things. There were even people craning their necks to look down. "Your Majesty, please allow me to drive away the enemy." Shiwanya cupped his fists in front of the Empress's carriage. "Permission granted," the Empress said. "General Shi, please wait a moment," Renbachian said to stop him. "Is there anything else, Sir Ren?" Shiwanya turned his head and asked. "Distribute some things to the winged cavalry." As Renbachian spoke, he got someone to drag out his grenades and called Gongzheng over to distribute them. Gongzheng was overjoyed when he saw this familiar thing. "Sir Ren, this thing is very useful. This battle will definitely make those thieves on the mountain wish they could grow 2 more legs." Renbachian pondered for a while, took out more than 10 skunk bombs, and handed them to Gongzheng. "These are extremely powerful and will hurt both sides. Try not to use them if possible. Use them if the situation isn't good." Gongzheng looked at the skunk bomb in his hand. It was indeed different from those grenades, but he didn't know how powerful such a small thing could be. "Let's set off." Shiwanya saw that Renbachian handed a batch of things to Gongzheng and didn't ask any more questions. After Renbachian finished speaking, he gave the order to set off. Renbachian took the opportunity to call Lin Xiaola over and set off with Shiwanya and the others. Shiwanya, Zongshin, and Qingping were in front, followed by some personal guards. Behind them were the winged cavalry, and the ordinary soldiers followed from a distance. Along the way, Shiwanya and the other 2 couldn't help but look for places to land on the mountain wall. Release! Just as everyone set foot on the gentle slope, a dark cloud suddenly appeared in midair, and countless arrows rained down. "Give me the rope. You guys stand down," Shiwanya shouted. He lifted the huge rope that was coiled into a disc, as if he was lifting a house. "Lin Xiaola, it's your turn." Renbachian reached out and poked Lin Xiaola's waist. Lin Xiaola immediately jumped a few times and landed in front of the steep slope. She then began to move her body and climbed up half the height in a few flashes. Fall. Suddenly, a few boulders and rolling logs that were bigger than humans came crashing down toward Lin Xiaola. The boulders that were bigger than humans came crashing down from a height of a few hundred meters. With their own weight and gravity, they smashed toward the three of them with great power. The deafening sound could be heard from afar, as if a landslide was occurring. However, Lin Xiaola's movements were more dexterous than a monkey's. It didn't take much effort for her to move around on the mountain wall, and easily pass through the gaps between the boulders and the rolling logs. The falling boulders caused a little trouble for Xiwanya and the others. The three of them dodged the boulders, placed the rope on the ground, held one end in each hand, and leaped high into the air. They landed on the foothold they had previously found, and then changed direction to jump in another direction. If Lin Xiaola's movements were more like the agility of a feline, then the three of them were completely like gorillas. Every time they landed, they would crush a piece of rock and then bounce high up into the air with great strength. As soon as Lin Xiaola leaped onto the platform on the mountainside, she caused a rain of blood among the ordinary soldiers. Almost every second, someone's throat was torn, and fresh blood spurted out from the neck with a slight sound of air leaking. At this moment, a loud whistle was heard. Soon after, the sound of heavy objects rubbing against each other could be heard from behind the platform. Lin Xiaola clawed at the head of a soldier, then turned around in the air and landed on the back of another soldier. She only stayed on him for a moment before she leaped high into the air and pounced toward another soldier. However, she had goosebumps all over her body when she was in mid-air. This was because she saw a huge creature crawling toward her in front of her. It was a huge python. It was as thick as 2 water tanks and was about 2 meters long. Its entire body was black and yellow, and as it slithered on the ground, it knocked into the soldiers along the way. Many of them immediately heard the sound of bones breaking. Ugh! Lin Xiaola's pupils turned vertical as she lowered her body to the ground. She completely ignored the soldiers who were fleeing in the distance and focused all her attention on the huge python on the ground in front of her. As soon as she saw that thing, she felt as if she had encountered something that she hated. The huge python also stopped in front of Lin Xiaola and raised its head. Its pair of yellow eyes exuded coldness and cruelty. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Xiwanya and the other two arrived at the mountainside and saw the huge python first. The three of them ignored it and split up to find a place to wrap the rope. However, at this moment, a reddish-brown figure pounced toward Xiwanya like lightning. It waved its arms in the air and smashed toward Xiwanya. Boom! Xiwanya and the other party's fists collided, and both of them took a few steps back almost at the same time. Xiwanya fixed his eyes and saw a monkey with reddish-brown long fur, which was about the size of a human, baring its teeth at him. One had to know that Xiwanya's strength was more than 2,500 kilograms, but this monkey was able to fight evenly with him. It was truly shocking. Furthermore, this monkey was extremely fast, at least a little faster than Xiwanya himself. He had been stationed in the south for more than 20 years, but he didn't know that there was such a strange beast in Tianjing Basin. At this moment, Zongshen and Qingping were also surrounded by 6 people. They were the spirit wheel experts who had appeared at Mount Wu. At the foot of the mountain, the Empress suddenly looked up from her carriage and said coldly, "They have encountered an expert." Before she finished speaking, she appeared 100 meters away in a flash. Rinpochian only saw a red shadow flash a few times in the distance before disappearing. Soon after, a loud roar was heard from the mountaintop, accompanied by the roar of a huge beast and the hissing of a huge snake. Rinpochian sighed. No matter how much he prepared, it wouldn't be as good as the Empress doing it herself. In such a world, he sometimes felt quite helpless. After a full 2 hours, the Empress returned from the mountain. "Your Majesty is invincible, and the unification of the world is just around the corner," Rinpochian exclaimed. He then saw that the Empress's expression wasn't right and asked, "Your Majesty, what did you encounter on the mountain?" "A few strange beasts escaped." The Empress looked a little unhappy. She was still brooding over the fact that the enemy had escaped from her hands. Strange beasts? Rinpochian was surprised. To be called strange beasts and be able to escape from the Empress. Could they be like the Kirin in the palace? A monkey, a snake, and a crow general. As the Empress spoke, Lin Xiaola appeared near them, threw 2 pieces of food to Rinpochian and said hatefully, "I want to roast them and eat them." Chapter 532. The crow general was actually a type of bird. It was a giant black bird with long feathers on its head. This kind of bird was generally between 3 to 4 meters tall. It was as fast as lightning and extremely strong. Its feathers were like steel, and its claws could tear through metal. The only drawback was that due to its weight, it could only run and jump on the ground like a mountain-gazing bird. It could not fly at all. It was said that there weren't many of these beasts, and they were generally at the earth will level. Very few of them had reached the spirit will level. However, the one that the Empress encountered on the mountain was stronger than an ordinary spirit will expert, which was considered rare. His speed was especially fast. Carrying that giant snake on his back, even the Empress couldn't catch up with him. Rinpochian listened to the Empress explain the situation in a few words, and was a little surprised. In his mind, he imagined the crow general as a pitch-black mountain-gazing bird. Where did these strange beasts come from in Tianjin Basin? When they were at Mount Wu, it could be said that almost all the experts from Tianjin Basin had come out in full force. They didn't expect that 3 non-humans would jump out at this time. "That's not a giant snake, it's a mongshan." Lin Xiaola corrected the Empress seriously. "You know about it?" Rinpochian was even more surprised. Saying that Lin Xiaola ate, slept, and ate after she was full was a completely true description. Furthermore, he had been staying in the palace ever since he was picked up. Other than coming out with him a few times, he had basically never come into contact with the outside world. It was truly surprising that he knew about this exotic beast. Why is it called Iron-Head Mongshan? Is it because their heads are more iron-headed? For some reason, Rinpochian found this name very interesting. Anyway, that's his name. His head is also hard, and he looks annoying, Lin Xiaola muttered. As for more than that, she didn't have any impression. However, when she saw the giant snake, this name naturally popped up in her mind. Roast it for a while longer and sprinkle some wine on it. Otherwise, it will taste sour. Lin Xiaola added after thinking for a while. Rinpochian put the snake meat aside and asked someone to bring Zhuacheng and Qingyan sword over. "Greetings, Your Majesty." Both of them cupped their fists at the Empress, nodded at Rinpochian, and asked, "Sir Ren, are you looking for us? Do you know what happened on the mountainside just now?" Rinpochian asked. "Experts are fighting." The 2 of them turned to look at the Empress as they spoke. "Do you know about the crow general, Mongshan, and a monkey with long reddish-brown fur?" Rinpochian asked. Just now, Protector General Shi and the others encountered these 3 strange beasts on the mountain. They are much stronger than ordinary spirit will experts. Even in Tianjin Basin, they shouldn't be unknown, right? There's such a thing. Both of them were shocked. Tianjin Basin actually had such a strange beast? Sir Run, please explain in detail. Rinpochian described the 3 strange beasts that he had heard from the Empress, and both of them looked pensive. "What have you 2 thought of?" Rinpochian immediately asked when he saw their expressions. The Empress also shifted her attention to them, and wanted to hear what they had to say. "That giant snake. It's not a giant snake, it's a Mongshan." Lin Xiaola snorted and corrected him. "Oh, that Mount Mongshan should be the strange beast worshipped by the 6 doors. As for the other 2, I've never heard of them. I'm afraid that they're related to the 6 doors," Qingyan's sword said in a low voice. "What's the origin of the 6 doors?" This was the first time Rinpochian had heard of this sect. Whether it's the experts or the martial arts of this sect, they aren't outstanding. They have always been in a remote place in the south and rarely interact with outsiders. It's just that there's a rumor that the founder of the sect once obtained a strange snake, and has been worshipping it since the death of the founder. Although the experts and martial arts of the 6 doors aren't outstanding, they are extremely good at communicating with wild beasts. It's called the 6 doors, but in fact it should be the 6 beasts. The elephant soldiers, monkey soldiers, and insect soldiers are the ones that people pay attention to in the past. Although they aren't strong, they are extremely difficult to deal with. In particular, most of the insect soldiers are highly poisonous insects, and anyone who gets hit will die immediately. Back then, the southern metropolis wanted to recruit the 6 doors, but was rejected. Your Majesty, did you see anyone wearing a brightly colored feather crown on the mountainside? Zuocheng asked. The Empress remained silent as if she hadn't heard anything. Ren Baqian knew from her expression that she definitely didn't care about the people on the mountaintop. Otherwise, with the Empress's photographic memory, well, he couldn't make it up anymore. Did you see them? Ren Baqian asked Lin Xiaola. I only saw that iron-headed mountain, Lin Xiaola mumbled, then yawned and said, I'm going to sleep for a while. Wake me up when the meat is ready. As she spoke, she found a tent and went to sleep. Although Lin Xiaola and the Empress didn't see the person with the brightly colored feather crown that Zuocheng mentioned, Ren Baqian still felt that these strange beasts were related to the 6 doors. The monkey soldiers, the reddish-brown long-haired monkey, and the iron-headed mountain. There shouldn't be a second possibility. Where is this sect? How many people are there? What else do you know? The sect is in the southwest, near the cliff. I don't know much about it except that this sect is extremely low-key and never interacts with outsiders. However, I heard rumors that they use living people as sacrifices. I once thought of going there to get rid of evil for the people, but later gave up due to various reasons. Living people as sacrifices are used to feed wild beasts, especially that giant snake. I wonder how many lives it has devoured over the years, Qingyun's sword said. Ren Baqian felt that it was fortunate that he didn't go. If he had gone, he would have been fed to the snake. After all, he could tell from the conversation between the Empress and Lin Xiaola that these strange beasts weren't weak. Even Qingyun's sword wouldn't be a match for any of them. It's not a giant snake, it's an iron-headed mountain. Lin Xiaola shouted from the tent with hazy eyes. Got it. Ren Baqian waved his hand. Thank you for the information. Ren Baqian cupped his hands at them. It's all right. Goodbye. The two cupped their hands and left. After they left, the Empress said, These people can still be of some use to you. Even though she said it in an indifferent tone, Ren Baqian could hear a trace of approval in her tone. Although it was just a trace of approval, it was already a good improvement. After the Empress went up the mountain, many experts fought, and the warriors and soldiers on the mountain had already run away from the other side. There was no one to stop them at the cliff, so the winged cavalry climbed up along the cliff. They were inspecting the mountainside and throwing down the rolling logs and boulders that were prepared on the mountain. The road was only 4 meters wide. With a little more force, they could directly throw the boulders out of the road, so they didn't have to worry about destroying the road. Ren Baqian also sent Baihu from the rearguard commandery to the mountainside to investigate. At night, most of the winged cavalry retreated, leaving only a small number of Baihu and a small number of Baihu to guard the mountainside. Chapter 533. In the residence of the warlord of Xueyang City, dozens of people were sitting in a hall. At the head of the table were 3 people. One of them was a handsome young man in his 20s with a resolute face. He was the new chief of the North Alliance, Taizai. Beside him was Xiekuan, the capital of the southern metropolis. Next to Xiekuan was the flower queen of the green bellflower, Raoyu. However, no matter who saw Raoyu's 300 to 400 kilograms body, they would feel that the name Raoyu was a waste. In particular, many experts of the older generation couldn't help but recall the flower queen of the previous generation every time they saw her. She was really talented. Below the 3 of them, on the left was a young man who wore a bright-colored cape woven from bird feathers, revealing his bronze-colored chest, and a bright-colored feather crown on his head. Below him were a few others who were similarly dressed. Opposite him were 6 spirit will experts. 3 of them were pale and had suffered serious injuries in the short fight just now. This Qi Zixiao is really powerful, and Shi Wanya isn't easy to deal with either. The talents of those barbarians are really terrifying. A spirit wheel expert with a pale face said. Recalling the short fight just now, he had to admit that the other party was indeed very strong. We still have to thank Mr. Bu and the others for their help. Otherwise, it would have been difficult for us to resist them alone. Another person cupped his hands and said to the few people wearing bird feather shawls and feather crowns opposite him. Not only him, but the others also cupped their hands and expressed their gratitude. Although these people, who were called Mr. Boo, weren't very strong and couldn't even be ranked among the Earthwill experts, what caught people's attention wasn't these people themselves, but the strange beasts that were slightly stronger than the Spirit Will experts. With the help of these strange beasts, although they still weren't a match for those barbarians, they at least had the ability to protect themselves. If Qi Zixiao hadn't taken action, the others wouldn't have been a match for them. Before Xie Kuan invited these people, no one expected the 6 doors to be so powerful. Everyone had always regarded them as a small sect that was proficient in communicating with and domesticating beasts and insects. Although this was true in some ways, the strength of the strange beasts in the 6 doors was too unexpected. What was even more puzzling was that the 6 doors clearly had such powerful strength, so why did they hide in a corner and not reveal themselves at all? Qi Zixiao is indeed very powerful. Tai Xingjun has suffered serious injuries. It will take some time for him to recover, said the man wearing a bird feather cape, who was sitting next to the leaders of the 3 factions. Xie Kuan understood and said, I will provide some sinners to Mr. Bu to heal Tai Xingjun's injuries as soon as possible. Mr. Bu can rest assured. A smile appeared on Mr. Bu's bronzed face. Tai Xingjun's self-healing ability was actually pretty good, but he would recover faster if he ate more people. The others acted as if they did not hear Xie Kuan's words. Those barbarians thought that they had won this battle, but they probably didn't expect to fall right into our trap. We wanted them to think that the rolling logs and rocks were part of our plan, so that they would lower their guard. If we succeed this time, Mr. Ning will have done a great service. Another person laughed. If it wasn't for Mr. Bu, I wouldn't have been able to do this even if I thought of it. A young man with a bashful smile was sitting next to a few Spirit Will experts. He looked to be about 25 or 26 years old, and wasn't very strong. However, he was sitting below a few Spirit Will experts and above the generals of the major factions. From this, one could see Mr. Ning's status. Speaking of which, I still have to apologize to Mr. Ning. Tai Zai smiled. It's all right. This matter was really unexpected. I didn't expect that gigolo to impersonate someone from the Yun Nation and sneak into your midst. Fortunately, it didn't cause too much trouble. Mr. Ning laughed. Speaking of this matter, everyone's expression immediately became strange. Not only did it cause trouble, but it was also huge trouble. Thinking of the suffocating smell from those days, everyone couldn't bear to look back. At this time, the side of the mountain near the mountain path has almost been hollowed out. As long as they pass through there, and let the death warriors break the support left behind, half of the mountain will collapse. Even the winged cavalry will find it difficult to escape such an earth-shattering change. Even if Qi Zixiao is fine in the end, do you think she can take down the 3 River Valley by herself? Mr. Ning smiled somewhat contentedly. Mr. Ning is right. In this battle, Mr. Ning and Mr. Bu are the main contributors. After Xie Kuan finished speaking, the entire hall burst into laughter. When the time comes, we will teach those traitors a lesson. I didn't expect the dignified Qingyun sword to be the first to surrender to the barbarians. Someone said resentfully, and many others echoed him. Wait until they survive the earth-shattering disaster. Someone laughed. That's right. Your Majesty, the meat is ready. It's time for dinner. Rinpochian sat in front of the fire, and shouted toward the carriage not far behind him. At this moment, there were a few pieces of mutton on top of the fire. After being sprinkled with spices, they emitted a fragrance that made many people secretly salivate. Rinpochian smelled the aroma and said, with my cooking skills, even if I were to become a chef, I would still be at the level of an imperial chef. As he spoke, the Empress sat down beside him with a wine bottle in her arms. Your Majesty, eat while it's hot. Rinpochian took a piece of mutton that was full of holes and placed it on a plate for the Empress. Just as the Empress was about to reach out, she suddenly felt something and turned her head to look behind her. What a fragrant smell! A voice came from afar. Who's that? The surrounding guards immediately drew their swords and looked in the direction of the voice. However, Ren Baqian was surprised to find that there were two more people beside him. One of them was an old man, or perhaps an old beggar. His hair was a mess, and he had a messy beard. There were a few pieces of rags hanging on his body, and only his pants were slightly intact. However, the pants below his knees were missing, and there were a few holes on them. Beside him was a woman dressed in a flowery embroidered robe. She had a bewitching face and a flower in her hair. This lady looked somewhat familiar. "Sir Ren, sorry to disturb you." The lady looked at Ren Baqian coquettishly, but her eyes seemed to contain water and were sparkling. "Ning Kaichin?" Ren Baqian was surprised. "That's me. However, I have already changed my name to Ning Kaichin." Ning Kaichin said coquettishly. "Who is this?" Ren Baqian looked at the old beggar, who had already taken a piece of lamb from the fire, and was wolfing it down, completely ignoring the Empress's cold gaze. Could this person's surname be Hongqi? "Who are you?" Many guards surrounded the fire with swords in their hands. "All of you can leave." The Empress stared at the old beggar, and waved her hand to drive the guards away. "I'll treat you to a drink." The Empress threw the wine bottle to the old beggar, who unceremoniously raised his head and drank a mouthful, exclaiming, "Good wine." Ren Baqian felt that there was something wrong with the Empress's reaction. One had to know that the Empress had always been domineering and fierce. Now that someone had eaten her barbecued meat, she actually gave him wine to drink? "After eating my dinner and drinking my wine, you will show me the strength of the world's most powerful expert," the Empress said after seeing him drink half of the wine in one gulp. "The world's most powerful expert?" Ren Baqian's voice almost pierced the sky, showing how surprised he was. The third most powerful expert in the world was Li Yuanzhu, and the fourth most powerful expert was Teng Yu, who was now the Empress. Only the first and second most powerful experts in the world were rarely heard of. It was said that these two people hadn't appeared in the world for decades. If they weren't on the list of the world's most powerful experts, many people would have thought that they were long dead. She didn't expect this old beggar to be the world's most powerful expert. Ren Baqian didn't think that the Empress would recognize the wrong person, especially the world's most powerful expert. However, why was Ning Kaichin with him? Ren Baqian looked at Ning Kaichin with doubt in his eyes. "This time, I brought the Shueka to exchange for the stun baton," Ning Kaichin said in high spirits. Then his face fell and he continued, "I met this person on the way, and he insisted that my green bead take him to the sky." "Then bring him." Ren Baqian didn't understand Ning Kaichin's expression. "Let's not talk about the fact that a spirit sword can't bring someone to the sky. Even a sword master like me can't do it. What's important is that my green bead has developed acrophobia since the last trip to Dayo." He almost vomited blood. He had never heard of a flying sword suffering from acrophobia. Chapter 534. The Empress, Ren Baqian, and Ning Kaichin stopped after exchanging a few words. They sat by the bonfire and looked at the number one expert in the world stuffing mutton into his stomach, as if he hadn't eaten for a few months. After a few minutes, he finished a large piece of mutton, and then reached for the second piece. Given the Empress's protective character, it was rare that she didn't say anything. She just waited quietly, constantly adjusting her body's condition, and her eyes were filled with excitement. Ren Baqian had known her for so long, but rarely saw such an expression on her face. It seemed that the long-lost number one expert in the world had appeared in front of her, and her fighting spirit was boiling. After half an hour, the man finished the mutton that Ren Baqian had roasted for the Empress. He then exclaimed, "I haven't eaten such delicious food in a long time. Kid, I see that you have a good constitution and are a talent. Do you want to follow me to find the stairway to the sky?" "You want a chef, right?" Ren Baqian laughed. He could tell that this person wasn't difficult to talk to. "Li Fu, you have eaten and drunk the wine. Let me see the strength of the world's number one expert." The Empress stood up from the ground with an eager look on her face. Ren Baqian laughed again. He didn't expect the name of the world's number one expert to be so down to earth. It really did match his attire. Whether it was the Empress, Hongwu, Teng Yu, or even Zhuo Cheng, they all had the aura of an expert. However, No one would believe that the person in front of them was the world's #1 expert if they didn't say so. Don't look for me for a fight. I don't know how to do it. I'm just a blacksmith, and my blacksmithing skills have been abandoned for many years. Li Fu waved his hand. I smelled it today and couldn't resist my gluttony. Don't be so stingy, little girl. The Empress's face turned green as she swatted at Li Fu with her palm. The surrounding air was rolled up by this palm, and the area within a radius of 100 meters seemed to have become a whirlpool with the Empress as the center. Goodbye, little girl. Li Fu floated away from the Empress's palm in a flash and fell into the darkness. At this time, Ren Baqian realized that Li Fu actually had a black iron rod in his hand. However, it was much shorter than the iron rod, about 70 to 80 centimeters long, and there was a turtle head at the front. Seeing that Li Fu had run away, the Empress was furious. It was rare for her to meet the world's top expert, and she wanted to test the strength of the world's #1. However, the other party didn't even take a single blow and ran away just like that, causing her to feel extremely disappointed. He then raised his voice and said, Li Fu, aren't you looking for the stairway to heaven? The voice was loud and clear, and it traveled directly into the forest ahead. The next moment, Li Fu landed in front of the bonfire and said solemnly, Little girl, do you know? I don't know, but I know how to ascend to the sky, the Empress said with a strange expression. Is that true? Don't lie to me. Li Fu's face immediately revealed a look of surprise, but he was also afraid that the other party would lie to him. Speak. The Empress glanced at Ren Baqian. Your Majesty, are you referring to a plane or a rocket? Ren Baqian felt that the Empress suddenly asked him to speak. Is there really something that can allow me to ascend to the heavens? Li Fu was in disbelief when he heard Ren Baqian's tone. First, tell me what you want to do in the sky. These two functions were different. Do you want to ascend to the sky to take a look, or what? If you just want to ascend to the sky to take a look, a paraglider should be enough, Ren Baqian asked curiously. I want to find the gods in the sky. Li Fu's face was overflowing with murderous intent when he talked about this. Are there really gods? Ren Baqian asked. Although there were many strange things in this world, he was still skeptical about the existence of gods. After all, there were very few theories about gods in Dayo, and he naturally couldn't come into contact with them. He heard that there were a lot more stories about gods in Great Xia. Also, what was this world's #1 expert trying to do with his murderous expression? How much hatred did he have? Or did he want to pierce through the sky so that it would no longer cover his eyes? At his age, he should be past the second stage of middle school, right? There must be, Li Fu said with a murderous look. However, coupled with his tattered clothes and the way he looked, people always felt that he was a lunatic. Can you tell me what you know about gods? Ren Baqian asked curiously. He was very interested in this topic. No matter who it was, they would be interested in something like gods. In particular, Li Fu was the world's #1 expert. He had been looking for a way to ascend to the heavens for so many years, and wanted to find the gods in the sky. He should know a lot of things that ordinary people didn't. Do you really know how to ascend to the heavens? Li Fu stared at Ren Baqian with his eyes wide open. I do know how to ascend to the heavens. However, I'm afraid it will take some time to implement it. It will take at least 30 to 50 years to make that artifact that can ascend to the heavens, Ren Baqian said after thinking for a while. 30 to 50 years was the fastest speed. It was only possible to make a rocket by directly moving all kinds of mature technology from Earth and accelerating development. Of course, 30 to 50 years would be at least 100 years on Earth. Perhaps by then, there would already be small equipment that could easily send people to outer space. As for what would happen if he couldn't find the gods in outer space, Ren Baqian didn't even want him to come back. In fact, Ren Baqian said this with another intention. He was the world's #1 expert. If he could keep this world's #1 expert in Dayo as a fighter, although it wasn't very possible, there might really be a chance since Li Fu was so eager to ascend to the heavens. Even if he only made a move once in a while, it would be enough. What should I do? Li Fu landed beside Ren Baqian in a flash and grabbed his shoulder. Ren Baqian felt a powerful palm grab him, and he immediately couldn't exert any strength. Let go of him. The Empress's face was full of anger. The red muslin on her body fluttered even though there was no wind, and her fine black hair also fluttered upward. No matter who the world's #1 expert was, no one could touch my people. Let go. The Empress threw a punch at him without hesitation. Afraid that she would hurt Ren Baqian, she deliberately concentrated all the force of this punch on one point. You can't hit him. I'm fine with this punch, but this guy is dead meat. Li Fu quickly shouted, grabbed Ren Baqian, and immediately fell into the darkness. Li Fu. The Empress was furious and immediately chased after him. Ren Baqian felt a strong wind blowing on his body, and he couldn't even open his eyes. This speed was even faster than when the Empress was carrying him. In just a short while, the two of them landed somewhere unknown. Li Fu. I'm going to kill you. The Empress's roar came from afar. Kid speak. Li Fu shook Ren Baqian to the ground. Ren Baqian was shocked that this ordinary-looking Li Fu could actually make the Empress completely unable to catch up with him. In just a short while, the Empress couldn't locate the two of them. This kind of strength was truly terrifying. Fortunately, Li Fu didn't want his life. Otherwise, even the Empress wouldn't be able to protect him. After calming himself down, Ren Baqian smiled bitterly and said, You ate Her Majesty's roasted meat, drank Her Majesty's wine, and even captured Her Majesty's man. Even though you're the most respected person in the world, this isn't very good, right? Li Fu was slightly embarrassed and said, That girl is difficult to deal with, and I don't want to argue with her. Tell me, and I'll send you back and give you something good. Ren Baqian felt relieved after seeing Li Fu's expression. This world's #1 expert was exactly as he had felt before, and he wasn't a scheming and merciless person. It's useless for me to tell you. At present, even the entire nation can't manufacture this thing, Ren Baqian said. With my means, I'm afraid there aren't many things in the world that can baffle me. Tell me. Li Fu said in a deep voice as he straightened his body. Although these words were a little boastful, given Li Fu's status, he didn't feel that he was boasting. However, when it came to manufacturing a rocket, even if there were 100 of him, it wouldn't be of much use. A rocket can easily send you beyond the 9th heaven, Ren Baqian said faintly. What is that? Li Fu asked eagerly. Tell me what you know about the gods first. Ren Baqian changed the subject. Li Fu hesitated for a moment before sighing and saying, 200 years ago, I had a fiancé. Come to think of it, my fiancé is quite beautiful and virtuous. Upon hearing this, Ren Baqian immediately imagined a romance novel with 3 million words full of love and hatred. This old man's fiancé was stolen? By the gods? That couldn't be, right? However, just 6 months before we got married, my fiancé suddenly became pregnant. Ren Baqian asked, Huh? However, my fiancé was still a virgin. People say that the gods met in a dream, and that she was the son of a deity. However, I couldn't accept it, so I spent 6 months forging this dragon turtle rod. I swore to find the god who humiliated my fiancé, and let him have a taste of the humiliation I suffered. Li Fu was overflowing with murderous intent, and his beard stood up like steel needles. This was a sign that his mind was fluctuating violently, and his body was full of vigor. Are you going to explode the god's backyard flower? Ren Baqian was dumbfounded. Putting everything else aside, Li Fu's ambition alone was worthy of being the #1 expert in the world. Backyard flower? Not bad, it's very appropriate. That's it. Li Fu then said sternly. This old man has searched for 200 years, from the desert to the East Sea, from the south to the north. From a blacksmith, I have become the world's #1 blacksmith, but this stairway to heaven is still like an illusion. I have searched for all the rumors about the gods in the world, and I'm preparing to go to the depths of the 60,000 mountains to see if there's anything I'm looking for in those endless mountains. He turned his head and stared at Ren Baqian sternly. Kid, if you can do this, I'll give you great benefits. If you lie to me, no one in the world will be able to protect you. Ren Baqian opened his mouth, and was a little dumbfounded. The hatred of this #1 expert in the world was so deep that he really didn't know what to say. After thinking about it, Ren Baqian decided not to tell Li Fu about his speculation about whether his fiancée might have been swimming or falling into the water when someone happened to shoot her. Ren Baqian was afraid that this blow would be too big. The other party had searched for 200 years. According to the other party, he was originally a blacksmith, but in these 200 years he became the #1 expert in the world. He gave up everything, fame, wealth, beauty, and all the good things in the world, all for the sake of revenge. Chapter 535. Ren Baqian pondered. What he wanted to know the most was how Li Fu became the #1 blacksmith in the world, and how he was on his way to finding a deity. What would those martial artists in the world, who wished to spend every minute on martial arts and wanted to advance further, think of this? What would a hard-working martial artist like Ren Baqian think? Also, Ren Baqian had a fiancée 200 years ago, so he should be at least 220 years old now, right? The lifespan of a spirit wheel expert was generally 180 to 200 years. Even if Ren Baqian lived longer than others, he should be reaching the end of his lifespan at 220 years old, right? Ren Baqian heard that there was a realm above the spirit wheel level, but he didn't know if Li Fu had reached that level. Could Ren Baqian wait for a rocket that would take at least a few decades to be manufactured? If not, Ren Baqian could only make a hot air balloon to fool Li Fu, and his hopes of becoming the #1 fighter in the world would be dashed. At this thought, Ren Baqian whispered, "Senior, to be honest, it will take at least 30 to 50 years to manufacture a rocket. I don't know if you can wait that long. Are you afraid that I don't have enough lifespan?" Li Fu laughed. "I can wait 30 to 50 years. Although I can wait, I don't want to wait that long. For the past 200 years, I have been thinking about how to kill my way to the sky and find that deity. Tell me about your idea." "Use a rocket." Ren Baqian found a stone and drew a rough pattern on the ground. "Use the thrust generated by the combustion of the fuel in the bunker to send the rocket into the sky." This old man has also thought about it. Continuously beating the air to raise oneself high up in the sky is quite similar to your method. However, even I can only rise 100 meters by beating the air. On the other hand, your idea sounds more feasible, Li Fu said happily. However, like I said, to manufacture a rocket isn't something that can be manufactured in a short period of time. It requires the advancement of the entire industry. On one hand, the manufacturing process, on the other hand, the alloy, and on the other hand, the fuel. Ren Baqian explained some of the issues regarding the rocket to Li Fu in detail, while paying attention to Li Fu's expression. In fact, it wasn't easy to manufacture a rocket that could send people into the sky without considering the airtightness and other issues. Without the alloy, how many tons of steel would a rocket that could send people into the sky weigh? How much fuel would be needed to push such a heavy rocket into the sky? Just solving this problem alone was not something that could be solved in a short period of time, not to mention other problems. Following Ren Baqian's explanation, Li Fu's expression became serious. Although there were many parts that he didn't understand, there were some parts that he understood. After all, he was a blacksmith himself and was a top-notch expert. There were many things that he could comprehend by analogy. From the other party's description, it was indeed not as easy as he had thought. Therefore, if we want to build a rocket, we must promote the technological development of the entire country to a certain level before it can be produced. This will take at least 30 to 50 years, and it will require the strength of the entire nation, Ren Baqian said. Li Fu crossed his arms and closed his eyes, deep in thought. According to Ren Baqian, this thing called a rocket was indeed very feasible. However, it would take a long time to manufacture it, and he really didn't want to wait that long. Ren Baqian sized Li Fu up. It was difficult for him to look at the person in front of him with admiration. He looked at Li Fu as if he was looking at a village fool. Although Li Fu was indeed the most powerful person in the world, after hearing about his stories, Ren Baqian felt that Li Fu was no different from a village fool in some aspects. Such a person was actually the most powerful in the world. Ren Baqian wondered how much psychological trauma the heroes of this world had experienced in the past 200 years. Why don't you wait in Dayo for some time? Perhaps your smithing skills will be of help at some point. Recently, I have been trying to make a steam engine, but there are still some difficulties that I can't solve. If you can help us with this, we might be able to speed up the progress, Rinpoche said sincerely. As for the steam engine, it could only be made after the situation in Tianjin Basin was resolved. If this expert couldn't wait and captured the leader of the rebel army, it would be a huge gain. I need to think about it, Li Fu said hesitantly. What else does Senior need to think about? You want to go to heaven, and I want to make something that can go to heaven. This means that Dayo's industry has reached a certain standard, and our goals are the same. Besides, I'm also very interested in what I can see in the sky. It's too long. Li Fu shook his head. It's better for me to go to the end of the 60,000 mountains to find the whereabouts of the stairway to heaven. Senior, this is Dayo, and the 60,000 mountains are also part of Dayo's territory. In this land, countless people will help you find it with just a word from Her Majesty. It won't be too late for you to go there when you have news. I'm afraid that little girl is going to find trouble with me. Li Fu shook his head. If it's because of you that you brought me here, Her Majesty will naturally not pursue this matter after I return. Her Majesty just wants to see how strong the world's most powerful expert is. If you have nothing else to do, why don't you show Her Majesty your skills? Her Majesty will naturally not pester you anymore. After all, you also need Her Majesty's help to find the stairway to heaven in the 60,000 mountains. It wouldn't be too much for you to show Her Majesty your skills, right? Rinpoche felt that there was a way to fool the world's most rash person. His tone became more amiable, and his attitude became more attentive. Li Fu thought for a long time before saying, I'll bring you back. After saying this, he carried Rinpoche with one hand, and another gust of wind hit his face. After a while, Rinpoche squinted against the wind, and could already see the fire in the distance, as well as the noise brought by the wind. Li Fu. The Empress was the first to discover the two of them. She shouted and pounced toward them. Little girl, I'm not here to fight. Li Fu carried Rinpoche and spun in the air, dodging the Empress. He casually put Rinpoche on the ground, and retreated to a distance. The Empress turned around and sized up Rinpoche. Seeing that he was fine, her expression eased a little. However, she quickly became cold again. Her two attacks were easily dodged by Rinpoche, which was a little hard to accept. Your Majesty, don't be in a hurry to fight. Rinpoche saw that the Empress was about to make a move again, and quickly stopped her. Your Majesty, both of you are experts in the world. If you fight, it's hard to guarantee that you won't be injured. At this time, quelling the rebellion is more important. Your Majesty, please think twice. Furthermore, Senior has already agreed to show us his moves and broaden our horizons. Why don't you watch from the side? The Empress frowned. Why did Rinpoche speak up for Li Fu after not seeing him for a while? However, seeing Rinpoche winking at her, the Empress knew that there had to be a reason. She snorted and didn't say anything else. Senior, we have heard of you for a long time. It's a pity that we haven't seen you in action. Why don't you show us 3 moves and broaden our horizons? Rinpoche turned his head and winked at Li Fu again. Fine. Although I'm not good at fighting, I still know a thing or two. At this time their positions had changed. Now that Li Fu was the one asking the Empress for help, he no longer refused. Chapter 536. In the west direction of the Wang estuary, dozens of holes had appeared on the mountain wall. Each hole was 4 meters high and 4 meters wide. From Jiangbei to the Wang estuary, they had to go around the eastern side. Therefore, few people could discover the cave entrance on the west side. At this time, the hole that was originally dozens of meters above the ground was basically filled up, but there were still soldiers pouring soil out of the hole. Inside these caves, there was a thick tree trunk every dozen meters as a support. After walking for a few hundred meters, what appeared in front of them was a huge space lit up by torches. It was tens of meters tall, and had a circumference of several hundred meters. Towering stone pillars stood in the space. If one looked closely, they would see tiny holes on the pillars. Countless tiny insects crawled up and down the pillars, making light but concentrated sounds. If someone with trypophobia saw this scene, they would probably have a heart attack. In this space, there were countless wooden racks, soldiers coming and going, as well as many strange creatures that were 6 to 7 meters long, covered in plate armor and hard shells. They had mouse-like heads and long tails. Some of them surrounded the pillar and licked it from time to time, swallowing a large number of bugs on the pillar into their stomachs. Some of them were digging at the edge of the space or on the shelves. Whether it was soil or rocks, they were like tofu under their sharp claws. In the middle of the space, there was a wooden platform next to the thickest pillar. An old man dressed in embroidered robes sat cross-legged on it, watching everything. Beside him sat a man wearing a bird feather cape and a feathered crown. "Mr. Chiu, it should be about time, right?" The old man in embroidered robe calculated the space of the cave and asked the man with the feathered crown beside him. "It's almost time." The feathered crown man called Mr. Chiu let out a few strange sounds, and the dozen or so people in the cave who were dressed like him shouted at the same time, and they all struck the gongs in their hands. Following the sound of the whip, the digging exotic beasts stopped and gathered near the stone pillars, licking the worms on them. "This world is truly amazing." The man in embroidered robes sighed as he looked at the strange beasts and the huge stone pillars in the cave. This strange beast was called Choyu. It was good at digging holes, and was one of the beast soldiers of the 6 doors. On the other hand, the worms could eat soil and pull out stones to form such a stone pillar. The combination of these two could produce miraculous results. However, this Choyu fed on these worms. Therefore he found it very amazing. Hearing the admiration of the man in embroidered robes, Mr. Chiu smiled contentedly. It was indeed worthy of him to be praised by a spirit wheel expert. For hundreds of years, the Cho family had trained Choyu in the 6 doors. It could be said that Choyu was a part of his family. When others praised Choyu, they naturally praised him as well. When the time comes to break the pillars, we'll start from the 6 pillars in the north, from east to west, right? The man in embroidered robes asked again. "That's right. As long as we cut off the 12 pillars in the north according to this order, the north side of the cave will gradually collapse. At the same time, the cliffs above will collapse and cut off their escape route. After that, the entire cave will collapse. Even a portion of the mountain peak at the top will collapse. Naturally, those people will not be able to escape," Mr. Cho said. "This heavenly Zhong pillar is the most important. It doesn't matter if the northern pillar is broken, but we must wait for everyone to leave before letting the death warriors break the heavenly Zhong pillar. Otherwise, all of you will be buried here." Understood. The man in embroidered robes remembered all of Mr. Chiu's words. After all, it was a matter of life and death, so he couldn't be careless. Looking up, he saw that at the top of the pillar in the middle, countless insects were climbing up to the top of the cave, piling up stones to form a stone net, connecting all the pillars together. At the same time, it was also strengthening the cave. "My task is completed. We should go back." After Mr. Chiu finished speaking, he stood up from the wooden platform and shouted a few times to the surrounding people. His clansmen immediately opened the boxes one by one and rang the bells with their hands. The insects on the stone pillars climbed down from the stone pillars and burrowed into the boxes. However, they only drilled half of the way in before the boxes were full. These days, the number of worms multiplied more than double. The Choyu took this opportunity to eat heartily. Their long tongues rolled on the ground, and a black worm entered their mouths. At this moment, halfway up the mountain, not only were the Empress, Rinpochian, and Li Fu present, but even Shi Wanya, Zongshen, Qingping Gongzheng, Qingyun Sword, Zuocheng, and a group of winged cavalry warriors and experts from the rearguard commandery were all gathered there. No one wanted to miss the most powerful expert in the world making a move. Li Fu sternly said, "I was born as a blacksmith and am not good at fighting. However, I have something to say." Everyone listened attentively when they heard what he said. Even the Empress wouldn't ignore the advice of the most powerful expert in the world. Everything in the world has a spirit. Humans have a spirit, swords have a spirit, sabers have a spirit, mountains and trees have a spirit. Since there is a spirit, there is life and death. Just like how humans have vital points like the heart and head, Everything in the world also has a vital point. Once you find this vital point, you can kill it. I call it a dead point. Everyone knows the vital points of humans and animals, but it's difficult for ordinary people to find the dead points of other things. As I said before, mountains, rivers, and trees all have a spirit. This mountain has a spirit, so it naturally has a dead point. Li Fu's aura rose slightly when he said this. Although it wasn't much better than before, it made people feel like he was different. His body seemed to have grown taller. The aura of an expert was also emitted from his body. If he was just an ordinary old man before, everyone could now feel that the person in front of them was the most powerful expert in the world. As long as you find the dead point, you can cause more damage. You don't even need to spend too much effort to kill it. After Li Fu finished speaking, the crow's leg on the short rod in his hand struck the ground at lightning speed. With this strike, everyone became alert and heard a dull rumbling sound coming from the belly of the mountain. Everyone felt their feet begin to shake, and huge cracks began to appear on the ground. Everyone was shocked. He was indeed the most powerful expert in the world. This strike could actually shake a mountain with a radius of several kilometers. This was simply not something that a human could do. Everyone looked at Li Fu with admiration. At this moment, the ground shook even more violently, and everyone even felt as if they were sinking. Chapter 537. No wonder he's the most powerful expert in the world. The power of this strike is earth-shattering. I'm afraid no one in this world can withstand this strike. Everyone was amazed. No retreat. Li Fu's expression suddenly changed. He appeared beside Ren Baqian at lightning speed, grabbed him with one hand, and ran down the mountain. At the same time, a slender jade-like hand grabbed his other arm. The Empress stared coldly at Li Fu. Are you trying to snatch my man? Stop looking and run. The mountain is going to collapse. Li Fu shouted, released his hand, and jumped down the mountain. At this time, the mountain shook even more violently. Everyone was shocked to hear this, and they couldn't care less about anything else as they jumped down the mountain one after another. Boom. The entire left side of the mountain collapsed from the waist down. Rocks the size of a human flew everywhere, and large pieces of gravel and soil fell down. The earth-shattering scene shocked everyone. Everyone fled as fast as they could. After a while, the Empress returned to the barracks with Ren Baqian. The rumbling sound was still incessant, and even louder than before. When everyone turned around to look, they saw a scene that scared them out of their wits. They saw that the right side of the mountain was also collapsing toward the left side. The gravel and soil rushed into the forest and flooded the barracks. Retreat quickly. The Empress's cold voice spread throughout the area. But there was something strange in her voice. Even she was shocked by the power of this strike. The surrounding soldiers had long been alarmed by the earth-shattering scene in the distance, and they quickly ran for their lives when they heard this. As for Ren Baqian, his eyes were wide open with a dull look on his face. That idiot shattered the mountain with one strike? This was a mountain with a radius of a few kilometers, and it was actually shattered by one strike? Was it really that powerful to die a little? The collapse of the mountain lasted for 4 hours before it stopped. The soil and gravel didn't hit the barracks, but it flattened a small part of the forest at the foot of the mountain. Everyone stood there and looked at the scene in front of them in shock. There were originally 2 mountain peaks, but at this time, more than half of the one on the right was gone. That place had become a pile of gravel and soil. The Wang estuary was gone. Everyone turned their heads to look at Li Fu, who had his mouth wide open in confusion. Then they looked at the hill, in the distance with faces full of shock. Was this the strength of the number 1 in the world? This was no longer a human, he was simply a god. Ren Baqian's brain was in a mess. The scene in front of him was beyond his understanding. Was this really something a human could do? Even the corners of the Empress's eyes were twitching. She weighed the disparity between her and Li Fu in her heart. After a while, she felt somewhat disappointed. Li Fu's strike had dispelled her thoughts of fighting him. Senior is indeed worthy of being the world's most powerful expert. Ren Baqian finally regained his senses after an unknown period of time. With a shocked look on his face, he said sincerely, "Such a person was worthy of being a walking nuclear warhead." This kind of strength completely shattered his previous understanding of this world. After hearing what Rinpoche said, everyone looked at Li Fu again. The world's number one, fully deserving of the title. I'm afraid that we won't be able to find a second person in the next 1,000 years. Shiwanya sighed. It was a pity that such an expert was not from the Aboriginals. Indeed, fully deserving. Qingyan's sword and Zhuocheng were full of admiration. The two of them were different from the others. The others were Aboriginals, and the martial arts they practiced were different from them. On the other hand, the martial arts they practiced were similar to Li Fu's. Li Fu was indeed a lighthouse on their way forward. Although he was very far away from the two of them, they could see a possibility. Just by looking at their worshipful expressions, Rinpoche felt that they had become Li Fu's die-hard fans. Shattering a mountain with one strike is fearsome and terrifying, the Empress said softly. Li Fu blankly looked at everyone, looked down at the dragon turtle rod in his hand, and then at his hands. Could it be that his strength had unknowingly reached this level? Although everything had a weak point, this weak point only increased the power of an attack by a few times. It would be fine if it was a smaller object, but it was a mountain. When he struck with his rod, he could only shatter an area with a radius of 1,000 meters, which was already considered the limit of this world. Now, it wasn't just an area with a radius of 1,000 meters, but the entire mountain. He didn't expect that he had unknowingly reached such a level. Although he had never thought of practicing and only wanted to find the gods in heaven, his cultivation level was constantly rising, but this wasn't his ambition. Li Fu was a little disappointed and frustrated. Even with his strength, he still hadn't found the stairway to heaven. Fortunately, there was a little hope now. Rinpoche noticed Li Fu looking at him, and was sincerely convinced. "Instructor, I want to learn this. You must teach me." In Shuiyang City, the experts in the city landed on top of the city wall, and looked at the Wang estuary in the distance. The earth shaking and mountain shaking just now had alarmed everyone. Some people were bewildered. What exactly happened there? Although they couldn't see it, the fact that the sound and vibration could be transmitted here was enough to show how powerful the earthquake was. As for the others, they understood what had happened. "I'm afraid that those barbarians wanted to cross the Wang estuary at night, and Mr. Yuyang cut off the supporting pillars, causing such a drastic change?" Xiekuan asked. "It seems so. Those barbarians definitely didn't expect us to prepare such a big gift for them. I really want to see Qi Zixiao's expression at that time." Rao Yu laughed heartily. According to this power, even if Qi Zixiao was there, he wouldn't have survived. Senior Su and Senior Zhishui have already gone to investigate. We will know when they return. Young Master Ning from the Yin Nation laughed. So what if it was Qi Zixiao? Zhu Wuzhen at the front line was overwhelmed by the barbarians. He was known as a famous general, but he couldn't compare to a few words from him. After an hour, two figures appeared from the darkness with shocked expressions on their faces. "What's the situation?" the leaders of the three major powers immediately asked. "The Wang estuary is gone. The entire mountain has collapsed." The two spirit wheel experts who went to investigate landed on top of the city wall and said, "Then Mr. Yuyang?" Xiekuan asked in a deep voice. "The cave entrance was buried, and no one came out. I'm afraid," the two of them said sadly. "How could this be?" Xiekuan was shocked. According to the plan, they only needed to leave a few men of sacrifice behind. Why didn't Mr. Yuyang escape? What about Chioku and his clansmen? Mr. Bu asked anxiously. "I didn't see Mr. Chiu or his clansmen or those strange beasts," the two spirit wheel experts answered. How could this be? Everyone was shocked. According to the plan, Mr. Chiu and his clansmen would evacuate first, and Mr. Yuyang would wait until the last moment before leaving. Both sides could have completely retreated. How could they all disappear? Xiekuan's expression was uncertain. After a while he said, "I'm afraid something unforeseen happened that we don't know about. Or maybe Mr. Yuyang and Mr. Chiu realized that the barbarians wanted to pass through during the night and couldn't retreat in time. So they cut off the heavenly crystal and perished together with the barbarians." I'm afraid so. Mr. Yu Yang and Mr. Chiu, as well as Mr. Chiu's clansmen, are really brave warriors, Taizai said. He had a higher opinion of the people from the 6 doors. He didn't expect that there would be such experts in the sect. Although those who knew Mr. Yu Yang didn't think that he was that kind of person, the truth was right in front of them. Everyone changed their opinion of Yu Yang. What are the casualties of the barbarians? Everyone asked. If Mr. Yu Yang, a spirit wheel expert, couldn't escape, the aboriginals would probably suffer heavy casualties. At the thought of this, many people looked relieved. As long as this group of aboriginal elites died, Dayo would no longer be able to worry about Tianjing Basin. They wouldn't even be able to defend Gu City. It was really a landslide just now, and it was difficult for the 2 of us to get close. Furthermore, it was late at night, and it was difficult to see. The 2 of us will go and take a look tomorrow morning. Thank you, sirs, the leaders of the 3 major powers said. At this moment, the haze in everyone's hearts had finally dissipated. All that was left was to go to the Wang estuary tomorrow morning to check on the casualties of the aboriginals. Chapter 538. Early in the morning, a faint mist pervaded between heaven and earth. 2 figures leaped out of the city and disappeared into the mist in the distance. It didn't take long before the 2 of them arrived near a mound of dirt. Who would believe that this was a mountain that was hundreds of meters high just a day ago? However, all of this was gone now. Looking at the current situation, they could still recall the scene of the landslide last night. There's no one and no traces left behind. It seems like Yu Yang and the rest are really buried underground. After carefully searching the west side for a while, one of them sighed slightly. Previously, I underestimated Yu Yang. I didn't expect him to have such an unyielding side, the other person said. Although Yu Yang has become one with the earth, he has done a great deed for all living beings in Tianjing Basin. In the future, we should set up a memorial for him. I wonder what the casualties of those barbarians are like. This time, the collapse was more severe than expected. Other than Qi Zixiao, Shi Wanya, and a few other experts, the soldiers from the Protectorate of the South and the Winged Cavalry had no chance of escaping. The so-called unable to escape even if they had wings is what they faced at that time. Be careful. Let's go to the top of the mountain and take a look. The 2 of them reached the top of the mountain in a flash. The traces left behind by the landslide here were much more serious than on the other side. This was because the mountain had collapsed towards this side. The valley between the 2 mountains had been completely filled up. As for the forest on the south side of the mountain, half of it had been submerged by the mud. Further south, there was a large campsite. It was as if nothing had happened. The patrolling soldiers, smoke rising from kitchen chimneys, and soldiers busy with all kinds of things. It was a peaceful scene. Although the landslides and the fissures were very close to them, they were separated by the forest into 2 different worlds. One world was tattered and full of holes, while the other world was as if nothing had happened. The 2 of them widened their eyes in an instant. Why was the other party's campsite still there? Why did it seem as if nothing had happened? Why? The 2 of them couldn't figure it out. Perhaps it was the Winged Cavalry that passed through yesterday? After all, the Winged Cavalry is our greatest enemy. With just the Protectorate of the South, there's no way we can contend against an army of 300,000 rebels. One of them said hesitantly. Everyone had hoped that the barbarians would suffer heavy losses from the landslide, but judging from the current camp, the number of soldiers walking in the camp, and the amount of smoke coming from the kitchen, it did not seem to be the case. There must be an important reason why Yu Yang would suddenly cut down the heavenly crystal and cause the entire mountain to collapse. In that case, it could only be because of the few barbarians, the famous Winged Cavalry. Even if the Winged Cavalry had passed through yesterday, they would have been completely annihilated. It's really strange that these barbarians didn't react at all. I've long heard that these barbarians believe that after they die, their souls will return to the mountains and watch over and protect their descendants with their ancestors. Therefore, they viewed life and death as a normal matter, and were not afraid of it at all. From the looks of it, That is indeed the case. He's just a barbarian. The other person snorted heavily. Just in case, it's better to test it out. Qi Zixiao must still be there, as well as Shiwanya. I'm afraid we won't be able to get away with it. The two of them looked at the camp in the distance and felt hesitant. At this moment, a Baihu from the rearguard commandery saw the two of them with binoculars. After reporting, a group of burly men wearing leather armor jumped out of the tent and ran towards the two of them. Upon seeing this group of people, the two of them first observed for a while. Then their expressions changed drastically. These people were obviously the winged cavalry that Yu Yang had buried at the foot of the mountain. What's going on? I'm afraid that something big has happened. Let's go back quickly. The two of them looked at each other with suspicion in their eyes. Why exactly did Yu Yang cut down the heavenly crystal yesterday? A moment later, everyone gathered in Shuiyang City. Do you mean that those barbarians didn't suffer any losses at all? Xie Kuan and the other two had ugly expressions on their faces. Last night, everyone was still in high spirits. They didn't expect to hear the worst news after just one night. Even if they did, the damage was very small, the two of them said. The two of us saw that the camp was very calm and had some doubts before, but after seeing those winged cavalry, we no longer had any doubts. Then Mr. Yu Yang. I'm afraid that something unforeseen has happened that we don't know about. I think I know what's going on. The man surnamed Ning from the Yun nation had an ugly expression on his face for a while, but he gradually calmed down. Mr. Ning? Xie Kuan looked at him with a probing gaze. Although I don't know the reason, Senior Yu Yang must have been discovered. That's why the heavenly crystal was suddenly cut off, but those barbarians didn't suffer any losses. The sounds in the cave can't be heard from outside. Unless someone discovered that the mountain was empty, and then discovered the problem. Regardless of whether those barbarians discovered it by chance, or if there was an expert among them, you don't have to think too much about it. Fortunately, we still have a backup plan in case of accidents. This time we will definitely make sure that they won't be able to return, Mr. Ning said confidently. Now that the Wang estuary has collapsed and the mountain road has been completely buried, I'm afraid it will take them 2 days to pass through. Now please send a general to lead an army to the hill in the north and set up camp there. Make it seem like they are going to meet them at the river bank. When they see this army, they definitely won't think too much about whether there is a problem or not. Given the barbarians' temperament, if they see someone blocking their way, and the number of soldiers is about the same as theirs, and the water is not wide, they will definitely cut wood to make boats and send their army across the river to attack. At that time, we will open the river and let the water rush down. Except for the hill, everything else will be swept into the water. Naturally, most of those barbarians will become food for the fish and shrimp in the river. Hearing Mr. Ning's words, everyone calmed down. What if they discover that the water level has decreased and have suspicions? Someone asked. If those barbarians could think that much, then they wouldn't be barbarians. And no matter what, they will have to cross the river. Do you think they will go upstream to take a look? Even if they discover it, they will just open the river in advance, someone said with a smile. Everyone nodded. Indeed, even if this plan failed, there would be no loss. If it succeeded, then the harvest would be huge. However, everyone still felt that it would be difficult for the barbarians to discover that the water level had decreased, and the river had become narrower. The only loss would be the crops in the north of the city. However, no one cared about those crops at this time. Thanks to Mr. Ning's strategizing and planning, even though those barbarians managed to escape once, they definitely won't be able to escape this time. Xie Kuan smiled as he stroked his beard. A just cause enjoys abundant support, while an unjust cause finds little support. Those barbarians are the enemies of you, me, the Yun nation, the Qin nation, and everyone in Great Xia, the youth surnamed Ning said with a smile. Well said, Mr. Ning. Xie Kuan laughed heartily. Soon after, the city was mobilized. An army of about 15,000 people left the city and headed for a hill in the north. They set up camp there and waited for the aboriginals to arrive. Chapter 539. Unlike the various thoughts going through the minds of the people in the south, the aboriginal barracks were very calm. The Empress sent the winged cavalry to open up a path on the newly formed hill. After all, the hill had collapsed and the original road was gone, so they had to open up a path that could allow carriages and horses to move forward. It didn't need to be very flat, but at least there shouldn't be too many rocks blocking the way. This was a piece of cake for the winged cavalry. The Baihu of the rearguard commandery were also sent out to investigate. In addition, there was a fierce man in the barracks who could smash a mountain with a stick. Even the ordinary soldiers had heard of this. The incident of Li Fu smashing a mountain with a stick was vividly told by some people. Coupled with the scene of the mountain collapsing and the ground splitting, Li Fu's reputation spread throughout the barracks. Furthermore, his status as the world's most powerful expert was a powerful proof and a legendary halo. In the barracks, Runbachian sat in front of the Empress's tent with a mischievous look on his face. As long as he learned Li Fu's stick, his days of being beaten up by the little Lolita would finally come to an end. "Sir Run, where's my electric baton?" Ning Kaichen was sitting not far from him with a charming look on her face. "Wait, I'll bring it to you in 2 days." Runbachian waved her away as if she were a fly and continued to imagine himself killing everyone after learning Li Fu's godly rod. Well, godly rod was the name Runbachian gave it. In some ways, it had the same effect as the finger of God. The only difference was that one targeted the death spot while the other targeted the G spot. After chasing Ning Kaichen away, Runbachian turned to look at the Empress in the tent. She was sitting there with a soulless look on her face. It was rare to see an Empress like this. It seemed that the power of Li Fu's stick had dealt her a huge blow. One of them was the fourth most powerful expert in the world, and the other was the most powerful expert in the world. The Empress suddenly realized that there was such a huge gap between her and the strongest expert. How could the proud and arrogant Empress accept this? "Your Majesty, do you want to go back and relax?" Runbachian got up and walked into the tent. "It will take at least 1 or 2 days to clear the way out." "Go back, I still have some things to think about." The Empress waved her hand. "All right." Runbachian looked at the Empress. It seemed that she wanted to bid farewell to her homebody life and work hard to catch up. Seeing that the Empress was no longer paying attention to him, he immediately disappeared from the room. That night, Runbachian appeared in the Empress's tent in high spirits with 2 big bags. Although the Empress wasn't by his side, his man-will level strength was enough for him to run amok in most places. At least for the past 3 days, he had found a lot of fun. For example, stuffing someone's head into the toilet, or using a pistol to blow up someone's anus. He was starting to like this country of Brother Black. This kind of chaos, the feeling of completely relying on one's strength to do whatever one wanted, was really not bad. Unlike in China, where he had to abide by the law at all times. As soon as Runbachian returned to the tent with a refreshed look on his face, he was kicked out of the tent in the dark. "Take the things outside." The Empress sent Runbachian flying with a kick. Immediately, she felt a wave of refreshment. The worries that had been troubling her for the entire day were temporarily put to the back of her mind. Runbachian lay on the ground, feeling rather wronged. Who did he offend? He was kicked as soon as he came back. According to the current time, the Empress should be asleep. He carried his things back to the tent. After daybreak, Runbachian came out of the tent and saw Ning Kaichen looking at him from afar with a charming smile on his face, which made Runbachian feel disgusted. "Where's the Shueka?" Runbachian asked. Ning Kaichen took out a palm-sized jade box and waved it at Runbachian. Runbachian turned around and went into the tent. After searching for a long time, he took out the electric batons, batteries, and solar chargers that he had just brought back. The 2 of them squatted at the side of the tent, as if they were carrying out some shameful transaction. "In any case, we have been through thick and thin together, so I won't cheat you. These are 2 electric batons. This is a solar battery, and this is a solar panel. With these things, you can travel the world with 3 electric batons." Runbachian took out the things from the bag one by one, and showed them to Ning Kaichen. "Sir Run, it's obviously 2 electric batons." Ning Kaichen winked. Cough cough. Ning Kaichen's winking actually made Runbachian's heart palpitate with eagerness, and he quickly chanted Umitba in his heart. Rinpoche had to admit that Ning Kaichen had become more and more seductive after his sex change. He was even more seductive than a real woman. If it was someone who didn't know about his background, they would probably be bewitched by him. Rinpoche explained the battery, solar panel, and how to charge it in detail to Ning Kaichen. After all, a person had to be trustworthy. If he were to directly give him an electric baton, he would probably realize that it was out of battery after a day. Furthermore, Rinpoche was somewhat responsible for his transformation. Rinpoche now hoped that these 2 electric batons could accompany him for the rest of his life. After explaining everything to Ning Kaichen, Rinpoche earnestly said, "I guarantee a replacement and not a refund. If you have any problems, come to me and I will replace them with 2 electric batons." Ning Kaichen's eyes were almost dripping with tears. "If I didn't know that Sir Run is too fierce on the inside, I would have wanted to marry you." "Forget about marrying me." Rinpoche waved his hand. Rinpoche only waved his hand halfway when he felt a gust of wind blow past him. Following which, there was a loud slap, and Ning Kaichen was getting further and further away from him. After the Empress slapped Ning Kaichen away, she snorted, turned around and strolled back. After a while, Ning Kaichen came back with half his face swollen. He looked submissive and stopped throwing flirtatious glances. Indeed, a married man couldn't be provoked. She threw the jade box to Rinpoche, picked up one of the electric batons, and poked it into her hand. Her whole body trembled, and her face was filled with satisfaction. Then she carried the box back to her electrocution treatment in high spirits. Rinpoche opened the box and took a look. Inside was a blood-red rhizome that looked a little like ginseng. Its body was slender and covered with many thin and long feelers. Just as he opened the box, a whiff of medicinal fragrance assailed his nostrils, invigorating his spirit. Fortunately, it's not a weird smell. Rinpoche got up and went to look for the Empress. "Your Majesty, how do I use this thing? It's best to decoct medicine. However, there isn't much opportunity to do so now. Just eat it directly, and it will bring out 60 to 70% of the strength of the medicine," the Empress said faintly. "Oh." Rinpoche opened his mouth and stuffed the shueka into it without any hesitation. "Why does it taste a little like carrots?" Rinpoche mumbled as he chewed. In less than 2 minutes, Rinpoche felt a huge wave of heat crashing all over his body. Rather than saying it was a wave of heat, it would be better to say it was a ball of flame. He felt his body temperature rising continuously, as if he was immersed in hot water. Every inch of his skin was red, and his eyes looked as if they were about to spit out fire. "Damn, it's cooked. It's cooked." Rinpoche screamed in his heart. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. This kind of high temperature made his brain muddled. All the sweat glands in his body were excreting water frantically. It was as if he was taking a shower, and his clothes were drenched in the blink of an eye. At this moment, the Empress walked to his back and slapped his body more than 10 times consecutively. The raging flames in Rinpoche's body were immediately dispersed into his body. "Throw him into the water," the Empress said faintly as she walked to Rinpoche's side and sized up his expression. When he lowered his head, he saw a tent that was erected high above him. Chapter 540. At this moment, Rinpoche felt countless tiny flames covering his entire body and burning every inch of his flesh. It was as if he was hammering out the impurities in steel. The black filth that came out of his body was washed away by the river water around him. However, outsiders couldn't see this clearly because steam was coming out of Rinpoche's body as if there was a fog around him. In his mind, there was an earth-shattering change. The original world of fire began to collapse. The volcano collapsed, lava and gravel flew in all directions, and strong winds started to blow. The metal chain and the spear, which were previously comfortably soaking their feet in the lava, suddenly jumped up and drilled out of Rinpoche's head. Rinpoche was tightly tied up with a metal chain. They didn't know what this guy had done, but they didn't even have a place to hide. As for the spear, it didn't have as many requirements as the metal chain. It just floated beside Rinpoche, as if it was weightless. When the river water washed over the spear, it would split into two. The Empress stood on the shore and looked at the faint mist in the water without saying a word. Although the Shueka was effective, it was only effective against Rinpochian. She could easily disperse this level of medicinal power, so she naturally didn't need to worry. However, even though she said this, she still stood at the side and watched quietly. Li Fu suddenly appeared beside her, carefully sensed, and asked in surprise, "Is it really a heaven-grade weapon?" Li Fu still looked like a beggar with tattered clothes and messy hair. Although Rinpochian had asked someone to send him a new set of clothes, he didn't care. To him, it didn't make a difference whether it was new or tattered. It had already been 200 years, so how could there be any more surprises? When Rinpochian was sent here in a hurry, he noticed that there were subtle fluctuations coming from the heaven-grade weapons. He didn't expect to see such a scene. He could clearly feel that these two heaven-grade weapons had Rinpochian's aura. Ordinary people judged people based on their appearance or smell. At his level, he could already distinguish a person based on their godly soul. His appearance or smell could be changed, but his soul could never be changed. Strange. This guy is obviously a man-will expert, so why does he have a heaven-grade weapon? And two? Li Fu was surprised. The Empress took 2 steps to the side and distanced herself from Li Fu. She could not shake off the stench on him. She could treat him as the best in the world, but that did not mean that she had to put up with that stench. She had no interest in answering Li Fu's question. Li Fu thought for a long time, but he couldn't think of anything. In the end, he put the matter aside. In any case, he could ask this kid when he woke up. After a long time, Rinpochian realized that he had regained control of his body. Then the first thing he had to face was the iron chain that tied him up. Fortunately, the moment he recovered, the iron chain and the spear drilled directly into his head. However, the 2 fellows were stunned after entering his head. Where was the original volcano? Where's the lava? Why was there only a vast desert left? How was he supposed to soak his feet? How was he supposed to soak in the bath? The only bit of fun he had was taken away? The 2 fellows were stunned for a moment. They wanted to go out and fight with Rinpochian, but they were flicked back by the Empress's finger. Seeing that Rinpochian was fine, the Empress flicked the 2 fellows away with her finger, and went back to think about how to reach Li Fu's level. Why do you have a heaven-grade weapon? That's impossible. Li Fu couldn't wait to ask when he saw Rinpochian come ashore. And there are 2 of them. Even I only have 1. It's probably because I'm a genius. That's why I said that it was right for you to teach me that spear technique. Only I can carry it forward and surpass the master. Rinpochian couldn't wait to throw a few punches. His speed was much faster than before, and his punches created quite a bit of wind. He tapped his feet on the ground and immediately leaped more than 10 meters away. The heart was fire, hid the spirit, and controlled the whole body. After completing the visualization of fire, the coordination of his entire body had improved. His strength and speed had also increased significantly. Although he hadn't tested it yet, he could feel his body, and he had a feeling that he was in control of everything in his body. This was the first time he had felt this way. Furthermore, he was 1 step closer to the earth will level. The next 2 parts were the visualization of earth and visualization of metal. In less than a year, not only did he reach the man-will level, but he also broke through 3 levels of visualization and reached the intermediate level of the man-will level. Rinpochian felt that he should be a genius. That's not right. Your spear belongs to Tingyu. I've seen him once before. How did his spear fall into your hands? It seems like it has been integrated into your treasure. As long as you reach the spirit will level, you will be able to use it without any problems. How can this be? Li Fu kept asking as he followed Rinpochian. Now, other than matters related to the gods in the heavens, the only thing that could attract his attention was the things that Rinpochian had never seen or heard of. As for that metal chain, although I haven't seen it before, it doesn't belong to you. How could it be on you? It's because they realized that there was no future for them to follow their original masters, so they abandoned the dark side for the light side. They can eat, drink, and even soak their feet with me. There's no future for them to fight and kill with their original masters every day, Rinpochian said. Impossible. Although heaven-grade weapons are condensed from spirits, they don't have their own thoughts. Li Fu said seriously. Ask them if you don't believe me. Rinpoche spread his hands. No, there must be something wrong. Li Fu's eyebrows were wrinkled, and his unkempt hair was swaying nonstop. He couldn't figure out how such a thing could happen. He realized that he had been searching for the gods all these years and didn't know much about the various secrets. Otherwise, he would definitely be able to guess the secret. Rinpoche performed a set of Fist of Death. The wind from his fists whistled, and each step left a deep mark on the ground. After finishing his practice, Rinpoche looked at the marks left on the ground and was somewhat satisfied. They were almost half as deep as before. He looked up at Li Fu and saw that he was still frowning and thinking hard. Rinpoche said, Senior, since you can't figure it out then, say no more. I will definitely figure out the reason. Li Fu reached out to stop Rinpoche. He was the most powerful person in the world, and had a better understanding of spirits than most people. It was impossible for him to think of something that others could think of. Rinpoche was confused. Did you misunderstand something? I didn't say that I would tell you. What I meant was that since you can't figure it out, don't think about it. That's fine. Senior, when will you teach me the divine staff? Rinpoche asked. In 2 days. I will teach you after I figure out this problem. Li Fu put his hands behind his back, lowered his head, and left with a bitter look on his face. As he walked, he kept muttering, Why? Why exactly? How did you do it? Why? Rinpoche felt dizzy when he heard this. If he couldn't figure it out in this lifetime, wouldn't he have to take this move with him? Chapter 541. After another day, the road to the Shanjiang River Valley was opened. The army packed up their tents and set off. Rinpoche was still thinking about how to make Ning Kaichen stay. After all, the situation in Tianjing Basin had to be kept a secret for the time being. Rinpoche wasn't going to place his hopes on Ning Kaichen's tight-lipped mouth. In the end, he realized that Ning Kaichen didn't leave after taking the electric baton, and didn't seem to have any intention of leaving. Are you going to stay here? Rinpoche asked casually. How can I go home in this state? Why don't you take me in? Ning Kaichen wiggled his body flirtatiously. His little butt wiggled coquettishly, and Rinpoche wanted to pinch him. Ba. Rinpoche looked solemn. However, Ning Kaichen couldn't go back to the Ning family in this state. Rinpoche felt that if his son became like this, he would beat him to death. Although it was understandable for a modern person to have gender dysphoria, it was understandable for other people's sons. It was impossible for one's own son to understand, not to mention in this world. Furthermore, even though he had some friendship with Ning Kaichen, he didn't think that Ning Kaichen would help him keep this a secret. It would be best if Ning Kaichen took the initiative to stay. If you don't have a place to go, I happen to be short of manpower. What do you think, Brother Ning? Rinpoche thought for a while. Ning Kaichen knew a lot about Great Xia and was knowledgeable about various places. Having such a person was still useful. Then won't I be Sir Ren's man? Ning Kaichen laughed hysterically. Pow! Ning Kaichen flew into the distance in an arc. The Empress walked away from Rinpoche's side without looking at him. She didn't even look at him. Rinpoche grimaced and felt that the Empress's whereabouts were getting stranger and stranger. It was as if she was everywhere and had thousands of clones. Furthermore, the Empress's habit of protecting her food was getting worse. Although he said this, he still felt a little sweet inside. After all, he held a considerable position in her heart, which was why she behaved this way. My maiden heart has been melted by Her Majesty recently. Rinpoche covered his chest and sighed. Then he was kicked by the Empress from behind. Riding on the fork-horned cow, Rinpoche climbed up the rocky hill and looked ahead. There was a few miles of farmland in front of him. Behind the farmland was a river that was more than 100 meters wide. Across the river was a large plain. There were neatly tended farmlands everywhere, and it was a scene of vitality. Under the illumination of the sun, it was like a beautiful picture of the countryside. On the opposite side of the river, there was a hill that wasn't too big. An army was in formation, and their flags fluttered in the wind. Renbachian had long known about this army. After all, they had been entrenched here for 2 days, and they even put on a defensive stance. Do they want to stop us with just these few troops? Shiwanya asked in disdain. Your Majesty, the winged cavalry requests an order to attack and exterminate this rebel army to show the might of Dayo's army. Gongzheng requested for the order. Approved. Shiwanya, send someone to attack together with the winged cavalry, the Empress instructed. Yes. The two of them excitedly went to prepare. Just as Renbachian descended to the plain below, a Baihu came to report. Sir, the water level of Li River has dropped a lot since the last time I was here. Oh. Renbachian glanced at this Baihu. He had come from the south to seek shelter, and his surname should be Qiao. If it was just a drop in the water level, he wouldn't have come to report like this. He was afraid that there was a problem. How much has it dropped? Renbachian asked. It has dropped by at least 1 meter. Some of the shallower riverbanks on both sides have been exposed, the Baihu said in a deep voice. Renbachian immediately became pensive. Although he didn't know much about this, he knew that there was something wrong with the water level dropping by 1 meter in a month. It would be fine if it was a small river, but Li River was at least 100 meters wide. Such a wide river had a lot of water. A drop of 1 meter meant that the water level was much lower. Sir, I was thinking about this before. I guessed that the water level dropped because of the lack of rain these days. Another Baihu came over and laughed. This person's surname was Su, and he came from the south. Oh. Renbachian responded faintly and asked the Baihu who had made the report. What do you think is the reason? I don't know. What Baihu Su said is possible, but the water level has dropped too much, so it's a little strange. That Baihu whispered. Sir, you can send someone upstream to take a look. That's right. Renbachian nodded and said, Guards. My lord. The 2 guards beside him hurriedly urged their mounts forward. Take him down. Renbachian pointed at the Baihu with the surname Su and ordered. Sir. Su Baihu's facial expression changed drastically. If I said something that I shouldn't have, please forgive me. Su Baihu didn't dare to resist, and was brought to Renbachian by the 2 guards with a miserable look on his face. I heard that we have to offer sacrifices to the sea god in the sea, and the river god in the river. It's fine if nothing happens, but if something happens, we will chop him up and offer him as a sacrifice to the river god. Renbachian said faintly. Su Baihu's facial expression immediately changed. Sir, I didn't mean it. Don't be nervous. If nothing happens, you will naturally be fine. Renbachian smiled amiably. Unless you are certain that something will happen? Some of the Baihu in the surroundings were shocked when they heard what Renbachian said. Detain him and keep an eye on him. If he escapes, I will offer you 2 as a sacrifice to the river god. Renbachian told the guards to detain Su Baihu and went to see the Empress. Your Majesty, ask Protector General Shi and Captain Gong not to rush into action. Let's go ahead and take a look first. What did you discover? A little speculation. I want to see it with my own eyes, Renbachian said. All right. The Empress knew that Renbachian must have discovered something for him to say this. A moment later, she called Shiwanya, Zongshen, and Gongzheng over and went to the riverbank to take a look. Renbachian stood by the riverbank and looked around. He immediately saw what he wanted to see. Your Majesty, Protector General Shi, Deputy Protector General Zong, and Captain Gong, take a look. The surface of the river was originally nearby, but there are still traces of it here. This shows that the water level here has always been very stable. At this moment, the water level has dropped by a full meter here. What did you discover? The Empress asked directly. Renbachian pointed to the 2 bridges that had been cut off and said, There was originally a bridge here, but the other party didn't cut it to prevent us from crossing the river. They wanted us to cut wood and build boats to cross the river. If the other party built a dam in advance to store water, and waited for us to cross the river before breaking the dam to release the water, our army would naturally suffer heavy losses when the water rushed down. Your Majesty, we will know once we send someone upstream to check. What Sir Ren said makes sense, Gongzheng immediately said and then laughed. However, This person underestimated our winged cavalry. Do we still need to build boats in this river? As long as we throw the tree trunks into the river, we can cross it. Then, the winged cavalry will attack the enemy? Currently, there are 700 winged cavalry warriors, and we won't be able to easily lose them, Rinpoche said. The number of winged cavalry warriors had reached a very dangerous level. If they were to lose more of them, it would be difficult to fight the following battles. Gongzheng, send someone upstream to check, the Empress said. At this moment, on a hill opposite them, a young man was watching dozens of winged cavalry warriors rush upstream from the river. Had these barbarians discovered them? It seemed like they were smarter than he had thought. However, that was all they could do. Everyone thought that he wanted to break the dam and attack them while they were crossing the river. In fact, according to his plan, even the two sides of the river would be swept away. This included the current location of the Aboriginals. Unless you return to the mountain now, it will be too late when you discover the surging river. Even if I can't completely wipe you out, I can at least make you lose half of your troops. Losing half of your troops and losing your rations. Let's see how you are going to fight this battle. Chapter 542. Rinpoche and the others were still waiting on the riverbank, while some soldiers went to cut down trees nearby. Whether it was building boats or setting up camp, this was necessary preparation. Rinpoche used a pair of binoculars to observe the other side, and realized that the other side had been waiting quietly and hadn't made any big moves. They should have seen it when he sent people upstream to check, right? It didn't matter if the plan failed. Did the other side still have a backup plan? What could it be? Rinpoche pondered for a while but couldn't figure it out. He wasn't good at this kind of strategy and couldn't figure out what the other side was thinking. In any case, they were completely stronger than the other side, and the only thing the other side could do was to think of ways to weaken their forces. Otherwise, using a group of new soldiers and garrison troops to face the Protectorate of the South and the winged cavalry, whose weakest members were man-will experts, would be no different from courting death. The other side couldn't possibly think that a group of new soldiers could defeat the Aboriginal army, right? Even if their numbers were 20 or 30 times greater. If war was simply a game of accumulating numbers, Dayo would have been destroyed 100 times over. Therefore, as long as they were careful, didn't step into the trap, and avoided too much damage to their troops, they would definitely win this rebellion. They would deal with it as it came. Rinpoche remembered someone saying that every outstanding commander was a coward. As such, they would think carefully, consider every aspect, and not miss a single detail. Rinpoche felt that this made sense. He wasn't timid at all, so he was destined not to be an outstanding commander. Rinpoche turned to look for Li Fu and quickly found Qingyun's sword and Zhuocheng. Now the two of them were like King Kong on the left and right. Li Fu ignored the two of them, and kept thinking about what was going on. Why were there heaven-grade weapons? Why were there two of them? Senior, there's an army blocking the way ahead. Why don't you capture the commander of that army and destroy them? Then, we can go back and study the fire arrows as soon as possible. Rinpoche rode his horse to Li Fu's side. Li Fu didn't even raise his head. His face was full of wrinkles as he continued to ponder. Rinpoche didn't mind at all. He didn't expect Li Fu to become a fighter just because of his words. Even though he looked a little stupid, he was still the best in the world. At this moment, Rinpoche suddenly heard a thunderous sound from afar. Is it going to rain? Rinpoche raised his head and looked at the sky in the distance. If it rained, the water level in the river would definitely surge, and the current would become rapid. When that happened, it would be more troublesome to cross the river. However, as far as he could see, the sky was clear and there was no sign of rain. At this moment, chaos broke out ahead. Flood! Flood! Quickly report to the Protector General and His Majesty. Retreat quickly! Many soldiers shouted. Rinpoche raised his eyebrows, leaped up from the back of his mount, and finally saw the scene in the distance. In the distance, a white line was rushing towards them. In front of the white line, dozens of small dots were running wildly in their direction like huskies that had lost their reins. F*ck. Renbachyan really wanted to curse. So this was the other party's plan. The other party was not waiting for them to cross the river to burst the dam. The other party had accumulated enough water to flood both sides of the river. It was no wonder that the other party was not in a hurry. Even though they knew that they had sent people upstream to investigate, they did not take any action. The Empress and Shiwanya were faster than him. They had already leaped into the air and saw what was happening. They immediately shouted, "Everyone, retreat to the mountain and throw away everything. Everyone, retreat quickly. Don't panic. Quickly retreat to the mountain in order of distance," Shiwanya shouted. Renbachyan landed on the back of the fork-horned cow and looked at the hill next to him. The rear of the army was close to the hill, but some people in front were already close to the river and were at least 1.5 kilometers away from the hill. With the speed of a manual expert, it would take about 3 minutes to cover 1.5 kilometers. The white line that they saw just now would take at least 3 minutes to reach this place. It seemed like they could make it in time, but the problem was that there were nearly 10,000 people gathered in such a large area, and it was impossible to escape. Just like now. Renbachyan looked around and saw that the soldiers near the hill had quickly retreated up the mountain, but the area around him was in a mess. Even if Shiwanya repeatedly shouted for them not to panic, chaos was inevitable. It would be fine if he had more time, but there was no time now. Whether it was water or fire, they couldn't wait for anyone. Kill. At this moment, a battle cry was heard from the hill again. An army of about 1,000 people rushed over from that direction and was met with a rain of arrows before they even got close. It's not an army, it's a martial arts practitioner. Even though Renbachyan was far away, he could immediately tell their identities from their movements. It was almost impossible to ambush an army nearby, but it was entirely possible for a group of 1,000 martial arts practitioners to approach quietly. Damn it, are the people from the rearguard commandery eating sh*t? Renbachyan was furious. The situation here was already chaotic, and the appearance of an enemy force on the hill made it even slower for them to return to the hill. If this continued, there was no telling how many people would die in this flood. Let's go. The Empress landed beside Renbachyan, grabbed him with one hand, and charged toward the enemy force that suddenly appeared on the hill. "Senior Li Fu!" Renbachyan shouted down at this moment. "Your Majesty, look for Li Fu. Otherwise, even if we kill the people on the hill, I don't know how many people will be washed away by the current speed." After hearing Renbachyan's words, the Empress looked for Li Fu in the air, made a turn, and landed beside him. "Senior, please help." Renbachyan cupped his hands at Li Fu. "I'm not going to get involved in the affairs of you little guys." Li Fu looked at him and shook his head. "If we lose this battle, the South will be in chaos. Outside, there are the Chun Nation, the Yun Nation, and Great Xia eyeing us covetously. If there is an internal rebellion, how will we have the ability to develop technology and manufacture rockets? Senior, please help us. You don't have to attack the rebel army. Just ask for help from these soldiers. When we get back, I will make a kite for you to fly in the sky." Renbachyan said quickly. Li Fu's previous strike had shocked him. If there was anyone who could turn the tide at this time, it would be this person. Li Fu hesitated for a while before nodding and saying, "Fine, I will help you. Get the people to hide behind me." Renbachyan was overjoyed and quickly said to the Empress, "Your Majesty, get those who can't return to the hill to hide behind you." Without another word, the Empress cupped her hands at Li Fu as a gesture of gratitude. She then got everyone to gather behind Li Fu. After everyone had gathered, the Empress carried Renbachyan and landed on a tree, closely watching Li Fu's every move. At this moment, the rebel army on the hill threw down a pile of corpses. After a short fight, only a small portion of them ran to the rear. Their goal was to delay the aboriginal army for a moment, and they had achieved their goal. Renbachyan looked ahead and saw that the surging tide was only 100 meters away from them. A huge wave that was more than 2 meters tall rushed toward them with great power and rumbling sounds. Li Fu was facing this wave with his staff, and behind him were thousands of soldiers squeezed together. In less than a dozen breaths, the wave was in front of everyone. Li Fu stared at the wave in front of him with a solemn face. The dragon turtle rod in his hand instantly became 2 meters long, and he pointed it forward. Boom! The wave in front of Li Fu exploded in a radius of dozens of meters. Li Fu was satisfied with the effectiveness of this strike. According to his estimation, this strike should be able to create a radius of 100 meters. However, the next second, the flood came crashing down. Li Fu was shocked. How could the power of this strike be so weak? Following which, he shook out a sky full of rod shadows and pointed them in front of him. At this point, the wave separated from where Li Fu stood and surrounded the soldiers behind him. The soldiers at the outermost layer could clearly see the countless fish in the water. Ren Baqian and the Empress could see clearly from the tree that Li Fu didn't just use one strike, but countless strikes. Countless rod shadows filled the space in front of him. The flood was split apart in front of him, and pushed outwards by the rod shadows that he used to point at both sides. The water collided with the water outside, and was squeezed together again. However, it just so happened to let the soldiers behind Li Fu pass. From a distance, everyone looked like a reef standing in the water, allowing the water to wash them. Having the experience of smashing a mountain with one strike, Li Fu's rod shadows that filled the sky and split the water 100 meters apart didn't seem very amazing. After all, he only used one strike to smash a mountain, but now he used countless strikes. The area in front of Li Fu was completely covered in rod shadows. However, Li Fu's control of power could be said to be at the peak. He was able to make the flood avoid the soldiers and merge 1 meter behind them. Such control was indeed the best in the world. The eyes of the Baihu standing on the mountain, Qingyun's sword, and the others behind Li Fu were glowing. At this time Li Fu, who was admired by everyone, wanted to curse out loud. Damn it! Why has my strength dropped so much? This is like seeing a ghost. I thought that I could split the river with one strike, but it took more than 100 strikes to do so. I have to use all my strength to barely protect so many people. If this goes on, I won't be able to hold on for long. Chapter 543. When the water flooded the area. The young man on the opposite hill chuckled. Although he couldn't see clearly from afar, at least half of the enemy didn't go up the hill, which was similar to what he had expected. Without half of their military strength, it would be very difficult for Dayo to take down these people from Tianjing Basin. Unless they mobilized their military strength from other places. They didn't have much military strength in the Chun nation. Hongwu couldn't be moved either, as Great Xia was still eyeing them covetously. In that case, only the Yun nation could be moved. This allowed Zhu Wuzhen to heave a sigh of relief. However, there was something strange. Why didn't those people escape just now? Instead, they gathered together. Very soon he couldn't laugh anymore. He saw that there was a place in the middle of the floodwater with high waves splashing up, blocking his view. That scene was like boundless seawater crashing against a reef. He had seen this scene since he was young, and had been deeply imprinted in his mind. Could it be that there was someone who could block the floodwater like a reef? Then he laughed. Even Qi Zixiao could only protect a few people in such a flood. Just now, there were at least thousands of soldiers gathered there. Even the most powerful expert in the world couldn't do anything. It was just that the splashing water was a little big, and he couldn't let it go. At this time, Li Fu had separated the floodwater, and the people below were temporarily safe. Rinpochen finally had the spare energy to look around. What he saw was a vast expanse of water. This side of the river was flooded, and many places on the other side of the river were flooded as well. For example, the vicinity of the hill was flooded as well. As for the distance, it seemed that the terrain was a little higher than here, so it wasn't a big deal. Rinpochen looked around and began to feel that the hill and the people on it were a little too much of an eyesore. Suddenly, an idea came to Rinpochen's mind. He first turned to look at the Empress, who was concentrating on Li Fu's rod. He didn't know if she was comprehending it. "Your Majesty," Rinpochen called out softly. He was afraid that there would be an epiphany in this world and that people would disturb her, so he kept his voice very low. If the Empress was really comprehending the god's rod, his soft voice shouldn't disturb her, right? "What's the matter?" He didn't expect the Empress to immediately ask, "Your Majesty, can you send me to the top of the hill? I have an idea." The Empress glanced at him, carried Rinpochian, and pounced toward the direction of the hill. Every time they were about to fall into the water, she would slap the surface of the water with her palm and bounce up high. Pillars of water exploded on the surface of the river behind the two of them. Rinpochian searched around the hill and found his bag first. These things were in the custody of the bodyguards, and he had brought them along with him. Then he took out a few skunk bombs. "Protector General Zong, can you shoot this thing at their hill?" Rinpochian found Zongshen, pointed at the hill, and asked, "Sir Run, what are you doing?" Zongshen was stunned and didn't know what Rinpochian wanted to do. "Protector General Zong, can you do it?" "It's possible. As long as I tie this to the arrow, I will be able to step on the water and reach the river," Zongshen muttered. "That's good." Rinpochian sneered. "Come on, let's hurt each other. Tie this to the arrow. When you want to shoot, pull out the ring and shoot directly. You must be fast. Don't delay. After pulling the ring, this thing can't stay in your hand for more than 2 breaths." Rinpochian didn't want Zongshen to end up like Shirhu. Zongshen would fight him to the death. "All right, teach me." Zongshen took the skunk bombs from Rinpochian's hands, and then asked someone to bring him a bow and arrows. The bow that Zongshen used was made entirely of metal. It was half the height of a person, and the bowstring was as thick as a thumb. People would even believe that it was a city-guarding crossbow. An ordinary practitioner wouldn't be able to pull it at all. Zongshen tied the skunk bombs to the arrows, changed his position, and adjusted his center of gravity. Then, he carried the arrows on his back and asked someone to bring 2 tree trunks that were as thick as an Aboriginal man's arm. They were chopped into 6 sections and clamped between his arms. Then he leaped dozens of meters high from the hill. When he was about to land, he threw a section of the tree trunk at the landing point and did this. After a while, Zongshen arrived at the original position of the river. After jumping up, he knocked an arrow and shot at the opposite side. He shot 3 arrows in a row. After landing, he bounced up and shot another 3 arrows. Then, when he landed, there was no place for him to stand on, and he plunged into the water. However, this current wasn't a threat to him. In the blink of an eye, he jumped out of the water with 2 big fish in his hands, and threw them back when he was about to fall into the water. The 2 fish had already been pinched to death by him, and were just enough for him to use as footholds. After the 2 fish, Zongshen fell into the water again, and caught 2 more fish to use as footholds. Finally, he returned to the hill. At this time, Rinpochian was looking at the chaos on the opposite hill with a pair of binoculars and smiling happily. Sure enough, the pain of others was the source of his happiness. "Are you guys going to jump into the water? Or endure it?" "It's better to endure it. I can still kill them again later." 2 minutes ago, Zongshen had attracted the attention of the other party when he jumped up. Seeing Zongshen throw the driftwood as footholds and jump toward them, the young man muttered to himself, "What are you trying to do?" "It's Zongshen, the Deputy Protector General of the Protectorate of the South. No matter what he's trying to do, he's only one person. The 2 of us are confident that we can protect Mr. Ning," the 2 elders beside the young man said as they looked ahead. Although they couldn't defeat him, they could still escape with him. This person had an important status, and his military tactics and strategies were admirable. If they wanted to defeat the Aboriginals, they needed to borrow his strength. No matter what, they couldn't let him die here. "Thank you for your trouble, seniors. However, I don't think he's here to kill the general and seize the flag, right?" Mr. Ning smiled. After he finished speaking, Zongshen jumped into the river, jumped tens of meters high, and knocked an arrow. "Be careful, Mr. Ning." The 2 of them pulled Mr. Ning behind them and stared at Zongshen in the air. Then 3 arrows shot into the crowd. The other party didn't seem to have a target. One of the arrows wasn't far from him, but it wasn't aimed at him. Mr. Ning didn't think that the other party's target was him, because he was dressed like an ordinary soldier. There weren't any important people in the other 2 arrows' locations. What is he trying to do? This question popped up in Mr. Ning's mind. Then, The smell of 100 years of aging and 82 years of old feces and other indescribable odors entered his nostrils. Immediately, he felt as if someone had hit him in the head with a hammer, and he saw stars. Then he punched him in the chest, causing his lungs to contract, and he couldn't breathe in any air. Poison. Just as Mr. Ning said this word, he vomited. Then, the violent vomiting made him vomit out everything he had eaten. He even wanted to vomit out his heart, spleen, lungs, and kidneys. Then his vision turned black, and he fainted. The faces of the two old men beside him turned green. When they smelled this odor, they immediately recalled their tragic experience. The smell was much stronger than before, and it was even more powerful. Not good, retreat quickly. The two of them carried the fainted Mr. Ning and fled into the distance without looking back. Halfway there, they fell into the water. Mr. Ning woke up as soon as he fell into the water. Then he choked on a mouthful of water. When he was lifted to the surface and smelled the pungent odor, he fainted again. As for the others, they felt like dying at this moment. Their eyes were seeing stars as they looked at the flood around them. To jump or not to jump? They had originally prepared a water attack for the other party, but now, they were completely trapped here. Chapter 544. The flood lasted for almost an hour before gradually receding. When the water level began to drop to his waist, Li Fu could no longer hold on. Fortunately, ordinary soldiers could completely resist the current momentum of the water. Ren Baqian was shocked when he saw Li Fu. Li Fu's hair and beard were stuck to his face was pale, and his eyes were lifeless. It was as if he had fought for 3 days and 3 nights and had been squeezed dry. He no longer had the demeanor of the world's #1 expert. "Senior, are you all right?" Ren Baqian asked cautiously. "Brat, you've harmed this old man. Stay away from this old man. Don't talk to this old man," Li Fu said weakly. Ren Baqian suddenly realized that the world's most powerful expert was still a human. In the beginning, Li Fu's rod that could shatter a mountain made him feel as if he had seen a god. Seeing him in such a sorry state, for some reason, she felt secretly pleased. Although this feeling was unfounded, the other party had helped to protect thousands of soldiers. However, Ren Baqian was relieved that a deity had become immortal. After all, Li Fu was too strong, so strong that people could only look up to him. Even the Empress couldn't compare. "Senior, please have a good rest first. I'll get you some nourishing things like saber-toothed tiger penis, panda penis, wolfberry, epimedium, and desert cistanche to help you recover." Ren Baqian smiled eagerly. Where did all this nonsense come from? Li Fu was so angry that he blew his beard and glared at him. He might not understand other things, but how could he not understand tiger penises? He had not been close to a woman for more than 200 years. If he ate the whip of a sharp-toothed tiger, how could he sleep well? After seeing that Li Fu had found a place to lie down and rest, Ren Baqian looked for the Empress and said, "Your Majesty, although the soldiers are fine, the military supplies are all gone. Other than the winged cavalry's mounts, all that was left were the cows and goats that were sent over from Gu City. These cows and sheep had been at the back, but they were driven to the hill in time. However, meat was only eaten together with grains before the war. If the entire army ate as much as they wanted, it would only take 1 meal. There are some in the city." She then called for Shiwanya and said, "Get the soldiers to chop down trees and build rafts to cross the river." He then called Gong Zheng and said, "Get the winged cavalry to get ready. When the water recedes, the winged cavalry will cross the river first. My request to you is that you don't need to defeat the enemy. You just need to stand firm. If they don't attack, don't take the initiative to attack." Yes. After waiting for another 2 hours, the water began to recede. The original farmland was completely covered with mud, and a large number of fish were left on both sides of the shore. The big ones were even 3 to 4 meters long and had a mouthful of sharp teeth. Ren Baqian hurriedly ordered his men to collect the fish. At the very least, they would be able to roast the fish for dinner. If not for the fact that all the supplies were lost, and even the pot for stewing soup was gone, Everyone could still have a meal of fish soup to drink. It was a pity that the martial artists of the pugilistic world, who attacked just now, were either dead or had fled. None of them were left alive. Otherwise, he could have found someone to test the poison on. However, most of the fish should be fine. He just had to pay attention to those that looked strange. When the shore on this side was completely exposed, there was still about a meter of water on the other side. However, the troops on the hill could not wait any longer. They jumped into the water and ran far away. However, the smell was still attached to their bodies and could not be washed away by water. A group of people in the water despised each other. In the end, the whole army scattered like a line of soldiers and ran towards the city in the distance. When the opposite shore was exposed, the winged cavalry began to prepare to cross the river. At this time, the water began to weaken. Like Zongshin just now, the winged cavalry threw a piece of wood into the water. Dozens of people worked together, and there was a piece of driftwood every 5 to 6 meters. It was as if there were 3 floating bridges in the water. Then they jumped across one by one. Occasionally, a few idiots stepped on both ends of the driftwood and immediately fell into the water. By the time they grabbed onto the driftwood and got up, they had already been used as a human ladder by the people behind them. They suffered countless kicks before they reached the shore with bruised noses and swollen faces. After that, he used 7 or 8 tree trunks to form a wooden raft, which was connected together to form a floating bridge in the water. By the time the sky turned dark, everyone was already on the other side of the shore. During this period, a Baihu sent a message. It was that the army that had escaped had reached the city in front, but they were not allowed to enter. Instead, they went around the city and went to the rear. Otherwise, the smell of those people alone would have reduced the fighting strength of the defending army by 30%. At the same time, the fighting strength of the soldiers attacking the city would also be affected. Not everyone could remain unmoved in the face of such a fresh smell. After everyone reached the opposite shore, the fish collected from both sides and 1/3 of the cattle and sheep were enough for everyone to have a full meal. The army began to advance during the night, and when the moon was in the middle of the sky, they reached the vicinity of the city that they had seen earlier. Your Majesty, this is Shuiyang City. This is the territory of the southern metropolis. It is said that Xiekuan of the southern metropolis is in the city, and there are at least 100,000 soldiers in the city. Renbaqian stood beside the Empress and pointed to the city in front. Under the illumination of the torches, the top of the city wall was filled with soldiers armed with bows and arrows, swords and spears. It was full of an austere atmosphere. On top of the city gate, a few people who looked like generals were looking in the direction of the crowd. They clearly knew that the aboriginal army was already here, but even with the help of the moonlight, they couldn't see too far. They could only vaguely see some silhouettes, and hear the sounds transmitted by the wind. They could hear and know where they were, but they couldn't see anything. This made the people on the city wall feel a little depressed. On the other hand, the aboriginals could see everything clearly from the top of the city wall. Pass down the order to rest for 30 minutes and then attack the city overnight. The Empress instructed Shiwanya. Renbaqian also distributed the grenades that they had brought this time. In the end, there were only 60 to 70 things that looked like smoke bombs. Renbaqian looked at these things and immediately laughed. Previously, when he bought the grenades, he brought them along with him, thinking that they might come in handy. He didn't expect them to be put to use so soon. He found Gong Zheng and instructed him on how to use them so that he could distribute them. After 30 minutes, Shiwanya began to organize the soldiers. His loud voice pierced through the night sky, causing the people on the city wall to immediately become nervous. They are going to attack. Archers, get ready. Boiling oil. A person who looked like a general on the city wall ordered. The boiling oil that was previously boiling at the top of the city wall was immediately moved to the top of the city wall. Everyone's eyes were fixed on the darkness below the city wall. They could vaguely see silhouettes swaying in the darkness, muffled footsteps approaching the city wall, and loud shouts could be heard continuously. Each and every soldier nervously clenched the weapons in their hands, even though this didn't give them much sense of security. After these days of propaganda, everyone knew what kind of people were in the darkness. They were the savage barbarians. Everyone believed that the city would be massacred after it was breached. Whether it was for themselves or for their families, they had to go all out today. Even if they had to die, they had to take a bite out of the other party. The general at the top of the city wall picked up a torch and threw it forward, immediately illuminating a tall figure. Shoot! Everyone immediately shot the arrows in their hands in the direction that they had seen just now. A group of people who had emptied their bows immediately switched positions with the people behind them, and another batch of arrows rained down on the darkness. In the darkness, a large expanse of saber light also lit up, forming a mass of light and shadow that blocked the arrows. Hundreds of people quickly rushed to the bottom of the city wall. At the same time, dozens of cylindrical objects were thrown toward the top of the city wall. "Lower your heads!" Gongzheng shouted, and all the winged cavalry warriors immediately lowered their heads. Bang! Different from the explosion of a grenade, there was a loud sound that was accompanied by a strong light that exploded in the air. It was a blinding area of up to 30 meters, and it was in the middle of the night. Everyone was staring at the darkness closely, and the sudden flash caused even more damage. More than half of the people on the top of the city wall who were staring down only felt their vision go white, and then they couldn't see anything. This included some of the martial artists on the top of the city wall. All of them covered their eyes and howled, "I can't see anything." However, not only could many people not see anything, but they also couldn't hear anything. In addition to the intense light that reached up to 1 million candelas, the explosion of the flash grenade also produced a noise that was 170 to 180 decibels at close range, causing some people to temporarily go deaf. Suddenly they couldn't see or hear anything, and it caused a huge panic on the city wall. Due to the sudden fear, many people squeezed and bumped into each other. One by one, boiling pots of oil were knocked over, causing even more chaos. Many people even fell from the top of the city wall in panic. At this moment, hundreds of small melons were thrown onto the top of the city wall. Boom, boom, boom. A series of explosions and flames immediately rang out on the city wall. After that, 700 winged cavalry warriors jumped onto the city wall and used their saber lights to create a rain of blood. Previously, the rebel army had made all kinds of preparations and plans. Even though the landslide and water attack strategies had failed, they still had a certain level of confidence. They had enough troops to defend the city. Chapter 545. When the winged cavalry attacked the top of the city wall, the city commander's residence was brightly lit. Xiaokuan sat at the head of the table with a glass of wine in one hand, looking like he was deep in thought. Earlier in the afternoon, he had received news from his scouts that the Aboriginals did not lose more than half of their forces, as they had expected. Instead, they suffered almost no losses. This made him unable to understand how the Aboriginals had managed to do it. Subsequently, he guessed that the Aboriginals would likely attack the city overnight. After all the supplies had been washed away. If they didn't attack the city, they could only retreat to Jiangbei. From the way the Aboriginals crossed the river, it was clear that they would not retreat. In that case, the rations in the city would be something that the Aboriginals had to obtain. In that case, there was an 80% chance that the Aboriginals would attack the city overnight. Thus, he was already prepared. Even though the ancient race was strong, their numbers were too few. In total, there were only 10,000 of them. There were 100,000 soldiers in the city. Rao Yu and Tai Zai had returned to the other two cities in the afternoon to prepare for war. As long as they could hold on for another day, another 200,000 soldiers would arrive. At that time, he would like to see how the 10,000 Aboriginals would win against the 300,000 soldiers. Even 300,000 cows and sheep would make their hands go limp, let alone 300,000 soldiers. Thinking of this, Xiaokuan drank the wine in his cup and asked casually, "Is Mr. Ning still in the room?" Yes. The attendant had a smile on his face. Mr. Ning had already taken a bath for the entire afternoon. But the smell could only be said to have lessened a little. Now he was directly soaking in the bucket. He had to change the water every half an hour to make himself feel less smelly. "Don't be slow," Xiaokuan said faintly. Although neither of his plans had caused any harm to the Aboriginals, he felt that this was the will of the heavens. At the very least, if he were in the position of the Aboriginals, regardless of whether it was a landslide or a water attack, it would be enough to make him suffer heavy casualties. This was especially true for the landslide stratagem. First, he would use rolling logs, rocks, armies, and exotic beasts to draw the enemy's attention, while in reality, he would hollow out the belly of the mountain. To be able to come up with such a stratagem was enough to prove his strength. Needless to say, his identity was special. If they wanted to leave Tianjing Basin after winning, they would need the help of the Yun nation. Xiaoquan pondered for a moment. Just then, a guard came in and said, "Everyone, the Aboriginals are attacking." "Got it." Xiaoquan nodded. The ancient race's attack was inevitable. Now they only needed to defend for a day and they would win. At this moment, a series of explosions came from the direction of the city wall. Xiaoquan listened attentively. His expression did not change as he continued to wait for further news. In less than 10 minutes, there was a series of explosions outside. At the same time, someone hurriedly reported, "Everyone, the city wall has fallen. The entire eastern wall has been occupied by the barbarians. The pacifying barbarian general is dead." What? Xiaoquan was shocked. His favorite moon reflection cup fell to the ground and broke into pieces, but he couldn't care less. How long has it been? The entire eastern city wall was occupied by the ancient race? How could he be so fast? What did Shueli do? However, before he could recover from his shock, another urgent report arrived. Report. The east gate has been opened, and the Aboriginal army is charging in. General Zhenbei is leading his men to stop them. Report. General Dingbei has been captured by the enemy. Report. Yi Dao sect's leader and everyone else are dead. Report. The entire Liangshan sect is dead. Report. Scenic Mountain Rain Monastery and Wind Listening Monastery are all dead. Report. The enemy is attacking the city lord's mansion. A series of urgent reports made Xiaoquan's face pale, and beads of sweat rolled down his back. How was this possible? How could they be so fast? Someone, inform the north and south barracks to quickly intercept the enemy. Xiaoquan shouted. Get someone to go to the granary in the west of the city and wait for my orders. If they can't hold on, burn the granary, Xiaoquan said while gritting his teeth. Get someone to send the young master and young mistress out of the city and bring the madams to the hall. At this time, Ren Baqian rode a goat through the city gate. It was the kind of giant goat that the winged cavalry rode. In front of him was the army of the Protectorate of the South that was charging forward like a tidal wave. In the beginning, they used flash grenades and grenades to make more than half of the defenders on the eastern wall lose their combat power. After quickly occupying the city wall, they opened the gate for the army of the Protectorate of the South to attack. This really caught the enemy off guard. In a short period of time, they cleared one side of the city wall and quickly advanced into the city. However, after being caught off guard at the beginning, the enemy began to counterattack, which slowed down the advancement of the army of the Protectorate of the South. In particular, the entire army was crowded on 3 streets, which made their advance even slower. Fortunately, the weakest Aboriginal soldiers were at the man-will level, and ordinary houses couldn't stop them at all. Many troops jumped onto the houses and advanced quickly. After reaching the left and right side of the enemy, they jumped down from the roofs and landed in the middle of the enemy troops to kill them. Occasionally, there would be a little accident. Ren Baqian saw with his own eyes a group of people jump onto a house next to them, and then disappear. After a long time, a group of people came out of the house dejectedly. Someone, Ren Baqian called out. Sir, get the people from the rearguard commandery to spread out and look for the enemy's granary. Don't let them burn or poison it, Ren Baqian ordered. As the order was passed down, many Baihu behind Ren Baqian rushed into the nearby houses, asked for the location of the granary, and headed toward the west of the city. Ren Baqian followed the army from afar and slowly moved forward. The corpses under his feet began to increase, and blood stained the entire street. The smell of blood was everywhere. Broken limbs and blood sprayed on the walls were everywhere. Ba. Renbachyan sincerely chanted the name of Buddha from his mount. He didn't know if he would go to hell if he died because he couldn't even bear to kill a chicken. At this moment, the door of the house next to him suddenly opened, and a few people who looked like commoners rushed toward Renbachyan with kitchen knives made of bone. Go to hell, you thieves! The eyes of these commoner men were filled with fear, and their faces were distorted with extreme fear. However, they still refused to stop. The barbarians didn't leave anyone alive. If the city was breached, they would massacre the entire city. This was what Xiekuan had repeatedly instilled in them these days. In this era, they had almost no channels to get information from the outside world other than what they heard from the mouths of others and the billboards in various parts of the city. Coupled with Xiekuan's repeated indoctrination, they were deeply convinced. Therefore, when they saw Renbachyan, who looked like a high-ranking official, these commoners couldn't help but rush out. As they rushed out, a few young people also rushed out from another direction. Kill them all, Renbachyan said faintly, but he frowned. The guards beside him lit up their knives, and more than a dozen commoners who rushed over immediately spat out blood and fell to the ground. Stupid! You could have lived, Renbachyan muttered to himself. It was hard to tell if his tone was filled with pity or something else. He then got off his mount, walked into a house next to him, and kicked open the door of another room. After sizing it up, he said, "Search and see if there are any survivors. Search the other houses where people came out as well." In just a moment, more than a dozen men, women, and children were thrown in front of Renbachyan, and 2 of them had their arms chopped off. All of them looked at the man in front of them with fear and hatred. "Why did you attack?" Renbachyan asked faintly. It was obvious that the army was fighting and not harassing the commoners. Why did they resist? Why did they attack him? "You bunch of bastards. If you don't die, we will," a middle-aged man who had one arm chopped off cursed. He knew that he was going to die. "Why do you say that?" Renbachyan squatted in front of him and asked calmly. "You will die a horrible death." That man continued to curse. Wrong answer. Renbachyan got up, kicked the man to the ground, and stepped on his neck. The sound of bones breaking could be heard by everyone. Next. Who can tell me why exactly? Renbachyan looked down at the crowd and asked. After a while, Renbachyan got the information he wanted, turned around, and walked slowly along the long street. These rebels really dragged everyone down with them. It had to be said that Xiekuan's brainwashing was quite successful. These fools. Sir, these people? Kill them. Chapter 546. Sir, run, it's time to leave. There's an army coming from behind. It's the enemy. As Renbachyan walked on the street, endless shouts of killing could be heard in front of him. A guard suddenly ran to Renbachyan's side, lifted him, and placed him on his mount. There were 18 other guards around him. There were supposed to be 20 of them, but Sher, who was placed on leave by Renbachyan, and was still staying in Jiangbei. They are civilians. How dare they drag civilians out and kill them? Your parents and relatives are all in the city. If Shuiyang City is breached, everyone will die. Even if you have to risk your life, you must kill all these barbarians. Even if you don't have any weapons, you must take a bite out of them. Behind Renbachyan, shouts of anger or mixed with other emotions could be heard. However, these words and the corpses as proof were quite effective in boosting morale. Renbachyan rummaged through his bag on his mount. There was a pistol, an AK, more than 100 bullets, a few grenades, and a few skunk bombs. Unfortunately, his gun was in Goose City, and he didn't have enough bullets. Otherwise, he could have staged a 1 versus 10,000 show. Looking back, he could already see a tidal wave of soldiers surging in his direction. Renbachyan picked up a skunk bomb, pulled off the safety, and threw it toward the rear. Oh no, it's poisonous. The tidal wave of soldiers panicked. Don't be afraid. This isn't poison, it's just a little smelly. Someone immediately shouted from the houses on both sides. It seemed like they had seen this thing before. However, the smell was really suffocating. It was as if a huge rock had been crushed on one's chest, making it hard to breathe and easy to pass out. The people at the front were pushed into the range of the skunk bombs from behind. They held their chests, vomited, and shed tears as they rushed forward. When they finally ran out of the range and could take a breath of fresh air, they were greeted by another skunk bomb. "Be careful, sir." The guard waved his saber to deflect the hidden weapons that fell from the houses on both sides. "Send 6 people up and kill the pursuers on the roof. Send 1 more person to speed up. Blarg. Send some more people to block the enemy. Blarg." As Runbachyan spoke, a pungent wind blew into his nose. Although there were enemies blocking the way, logically speaking, their current speed of advancement was not considered slow. After all, the powerful aboriginals had a greater advantage at night. If one were to look down from the sky, the 3 armies would look like 3 gluttonous snakes that were constantly devouring Daudu in front of them. However, the smell behind him was even faster. This thing is really a double-edged sword. It hurts both the user and the enemy. It's better to prepare more stun grenades and flash grenades next time. Runbachyan couldn't help but think. But even so, the skunk bomb could be very useful sometimes, especially at this time, so he had no choice but to use it. For example, right now, the pursuers behind them were crying and vomiting as they chased after them. They probably only had half of their forces left. Runbachyan tore off a piece of cloth and wrapped it around his face. Even though it wasn't very useful, it was better than nothing. "Cut this place off. Let the pillars fall toward the houses on both sides." Just as Runbachyan covered his face, his eyes suddenly lit up. He and the others had just passed by something that looked like a memorial archway. There were 2 thick wooden pillars on both sides, and a sign was attached to each of them. "Pingxing Street" was what was written on the sign. One of the guards leaped high and cut the sign in half. The other 2 guards cut down the pillars and pushed them up, causing them to fall toward the houses on both sides. With a loud bang, the 2 pillars formed an X in the middle of the street. Although the enemy could drill through, they had no choice but to slow down here. "Stop and intercept them here." Runbachyan stopped in his tracks while the rest of the guards stood behind the fallen pillars. In any case, as long as they could obstruct the enemy for a while, they could prevent the soldiers in front from being attacked from both sides. Not long after everyone stopped, the enemy caught up with them. Their eyes were bloodshot and tears were streaming down their cheeks. Their bodies were also emitting a pungent stench, causing many of the guards to turn green. "Kill!" Following the shouts of the soldiers, one by one, they drilled through the gaps around the X. There were only 6 or 7 of them at a time. The well-prepared guards raised their swords, and blood immediately sprayed out. Then, Runbachyan threw another skunk bomb toward the center of the street, which was blocked by the soldiers. This skunk bomb was really too wicked. The enemy had already tightly packed the street, which was more than 7 meters wide. The front was blocked, the back was also blocked by their own people, and there were buildings on both sides. The suffocating stench filled this section of the street, and the enemy could only cry and vomit as they squeezed forward. When they finally squeezed to the front with great difficulty, they had already lost half of their strength. What greeted them were the steel swords of more than a dozen Earthwheel-level guards. Many of them hacked at the 2 pillars in front of them, but ordinary people could only leave scratches on them with bone swords. "Get lost, I'll do it." A burly man squeezed out of the crowd and lifted a pillar. The others followed suit and tried to move the 2 pillars away. However, the pillars were stuck in the walls on both sides. When they tried their best to lift the pillars, they were greeted by several sword rays. Runbachyan looked up and saw figures moving quickly on the roofs of the houses on both sides. Fortunately, those experts didn't take the usual route, and were all on the roofs. That was why the street below was able to block the enemy for so long. Following a series of dull footsteps, Runbachyan looked back and saw an army of a few hundred people rushing over. "Sir, run." They cupped their fists and greeted. "I'll leave it to you. Stop them." Runbachyan called for his guards to quickly withdraw, and the reinforcements immediately sent some people to block the enemy. Runbachyan jumped down from his mount, jumped onto a roof, and looked at both sides of the street. Sure enough, they were also blocked from behind. In the distance, he could see densely packed torches rushing in this direction. If the entire city was a big piece of pie, then the Aboriginal army was a steel knife that directly cut into it. However, after the steel knife was pulled out, the pie behind the steel knife closed up again, leaving only a small gap. Seeing Renbachyan appear on the roof, a few people who looked like captains immediately jumped onto the roof. Bang! 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 Renbachyan shot down the people who jumped onto the roof, and threw 2 skunk bombs down. Seeing that many people were pointing their bows at him, he quickly jumped down. "Let's go!" Renbachyan jumped back onto his mount, and called out to the guards. By the time Renbachyan and the guards reached the front, Qingping had already taken over the warlord's residence. Renbachyan strode into the residence, and saw more than a dozen women lying in the hall. The blood on their bodies formed a small lake below their bodies. Renbachyan frowned and sized them up. He saw that the oldest of these women was about 40 years old, and the youngest was only a teenager. The injuries on their bodies were sword wounds. This wasn't done by the army. This thought immediately popped up in Renbachyan's mind. The Aboriginals mostly used knives and mainly chopped. As a result, the places that they passed through were all severed limbs. Some of the generals also used heavy weapons such as broadswords, hammers, and maces. Since this wasn't done by the army, it must have been done by the Aboriginals themselves. According to the information he received, this was Siakoan's residence. In that case, were these people killed by Siakoan? Looking at the appearance, age, and attire of these women, they were probably Siakoan's wife and daughter. This person was vicious enough to not forget to kill his wife and daughter, before escaping to prevent them from falling into the hands of the enemy. Chapter 547. Today, my hands were cheap. I took a look at the book review and comments section. Really, for an author, it was really cheap to look at the book review and comments section. This was because there were always various reasonable or inexplicable comments in the book review and comments section. If you asked any author who wasn't a standalone author, they would definitely receive such an answer. In the book review and comments section, some people said that the book had no main plot, some people ridiculed, and there were even people who criticized me for saying that this book was a type of Tian one. I only wanted to say one thing. No main plot? Isn't recovering Tianjin Basin the main plot? If we don't recover the people here, do we rely on the Aboriginals to develop technology? In my setting, this part of the content is part of the main plot. As for the rest, I'm too lazy to explain. You can think whatever you want. In fact, I don't even know what the main plot in your hearts is. I'll tell you my story. How you view this story, whether it's good or bad, is up to the readers. In addition, there were some people who read pirated versions, and then came here to criticize the original version. I didn't want to say anything about how much a book costs per month. Even though I couldn't do nothing when the readers who spent money to read the book criticized me, I still had the intention to communicate with them. However, there were also some people who had the mentality of bandits. If there are free things, why spend money? Since they had become bandits, they shouldn't jump out with a clear conscience. If they felt that the book wasn't good and wasn't worth spending money on, they could choose not to read it. No one would force them to read it. Chapter 548. Oh, they went back halfway after coming out? Renbachyan looked at the contents of the paper in front of him and muttered. How did you get the news? On this piece of paper was the whereabouts of one of the leaders of the rebel army, Tai Zai, the son of the former chief of the North Alliance. They set off on the night the Aboriginals attacked Shuiyang City, and returned halfway the next day. It seemed that they had received the news of Shuiyang City being breached. He was sent to persuade the rebel army to surrender. In the beginning, the situation was still fine. Later on, as the news of the surrender spread, the rebel army began a large-scale manhunt. Some of them were killed, while some escaped and went into hiding. This person hid in time. I just got in touch with him, Zwalung said in a deep voice. Where is he? Renbachyan asked. He didn't come back. This person is now a lieutenant under Tai Zai. When the army crossed the river, many people who were in hiding came to Shuiyang City. He was the one who brought the news back through others. Those people who didn't surrender but didn't recognize him? Did he use some means to hide his identity? Ren Baqian was puzzled at first, but he soon understood. Yes, he has been using a fake face for the past few decades. This time, he used the same face to persuade people to surrender. When he sensed that something was wrong, he immediately changed his identity. I just found out about this, Zuocheng said, sounding a little incredulous. This person wasn't a nobody, but he had been wearing a fake face for decades without anyone noticing. If it weren't for this incident, perhaps no one would have noticed. This was really amazing. He's a talent. What's his name? Ren Baqian was a little happy. Such a person could be very useful. Ren Baqian immediately thought of letting this person train spies in the future. Sir, his name is Hu Cheng. He's at the upper level of the Manwil level, Zuoleng replied. Is there any way to contact him? Ren Baqian asked. Although he wasn't very strong, his strength wasn't the most important thing about him. He left a way to contact him. As long as you put the news somewhere on time, he will naturally get someone to retrieve it, Zuoleng said. Well, let him bring back important news from Taizai and don't expose his identity, because of some insignificant news. If you discover that something is amiss, get away in time. If necessary, send someone to support him, Ren Baqian instructed. As for those who came back, I'll meet them in the afternoon. Have you found the location of the rearguard commandery? Sir, we've found a suitable residence. The owner has already moved elsewhere. Yes. Ren Baqian nodded and asked. How are the 3 scholars from Great Xia doing? Not bad. You can infer some useful information from some intelligence reports. After understanding the situation, Ren Baqian dismissed Zuoleng. In the afternoon, he met with those martial artists who had managed to escape the calamity in the south, and absorbed them into the protectorate. After all, those who survived in that kind of situation were either good at hiding, good at escaping, or careful and cautious enough. No matter which one it was what he needed. At night, Ren Baqian returned to Earth. He had been busy with various things in Dayo for the past few days, and could finally rest after returning to Earth. Unfortunately, in a place like Congo, where black men were everywhere, he didn't even have the guts to entertain himself. Just as he switched on his phone, he saw a series of messages from Yang Senator according to what Yang Sun said. Ren Baqian checked on the internet, and found out that a lot of things had happened in the country recently. The biggest thing was that a few big tigers had fallen one after another. And this was what Yang Sun wanted to say. It seemed like this was his explanation for Ren Baqian. Looking at the slightly familiar names and their identities, Ren Baqian finally heaved a sigh of relief. Fortunately, he didn't use some small fries to fool him. Regardless of whether there were other people or not, at least what he saw was enough. It was also enough to deter others. Presumably, he would be able to live in peace for a period of time in the future. After staying in Congo for another 2 days, Ren Baqian made contact with a relatively big arms dealer. He was said to have a lot of connections. Some things that weren't easy to get could be obtained if one was willing to pay a high price. For example, a tactical nuclear bomb with a yield of 2,000 tons. Back then, the US bombed a 14,000-ton atomic bomb, causing 200,000 casualties. The number of deaths on that day was 80,000. If used well, a tactical nuclear bomb with a yield of 2,000 tons was enough to wipe out an army of tens of thousands. This kind of power could already be considered a precious military artifact. What was more precious was the deterrent power of this weapon. As long as it was used once, everyone would have to kneel if a nuclear warhead was thrown at them. Unfortunately, this was only a rumor. Since both parties weren't familiar with each other, the other party naturally denied it. Ren Baqian left the contact information of the arms dealer, and was prepared to find out more about him in the future. If he could get 1 or 2 nuclear bombs from the other party, he would definitely give one to Xia Baichong. After settling this matter, Ren Baqian finally got on the plane for the return trip. The moment he stepped on the plane, many people in the distance heaved a sigh of relief. Many people were afraid that he would hook up with some flirtatious slut outside, which would be troublesome. Ren Baqian got off the plane and rushed straight to the Messier 87 department. He was very interested in the research results that Yang Sun had sent him. Both parties met and pretended that nothing had happened in the past month. You said that you found meridians? Ren Baqian was the first to ask. This kind of research progress made him extremely concerned. Yes, take a seat first. Yang Sun asked, do you want some tea? After making 2 cups of tea, Yang Sun said, we have indeed found it. It's called the mesenchyme. In fact, it was first discovered overseas. It's an extremely small network of channels filled with liquid that penetrates the connective tissue. It exists under the human skin and is responsible for the circulation of water in the human body. It's like the highway of liquid flow in the human body. The mesenchyme is known as a kind of organ. Although it was first discovered overseas, there hasn't been much research on it due to the lack of time. Recently, our researchers have made a new discovery through the corpses provided by you and some manual experts who have reached the manual level. After a practitioner reaches the manual level, the essence and blood in the body will be transformed into qi. This qi is constantly flowing in the body, and the channel through which it flows is the mesenchyme. This is also known as the meridians. After Yang Sun finished speaking, Ren Baqian immediately gave him a thumbs up and said, great discovery. After this discovery, we have already optimized the previous martial arts techniques. Now it is more suitable for warriors in the environment of Earth. I want a copy. Ren Baqian laughed. The research had finally yielded results, and it was indeed a happy thing. Now he finally saw some returns. He could rest assured that he could hand over this kind of optimized martial arts technique to his parents and Ren Wanyan. We need more martial arts techniques. The more comprehensive the database is, the more we can research, Yang Sun said. Yes, I just happen to have a batch of martial arts techniques. It's better than what you have obtained previously, Ren Baqian said. You really won't release the eagle until you see the rabbit. Yang Sun couldn't help but say. Don't say that. You have to let me see some returns. After all, compared to what I have given you, what you have given me is already very little. Furthermore, this batch of things was indeed obtained recently. You also know that I have been at war recently and have just raided a large number of sections. Ren Baqian laughed heartily. Oh. Yang Sun immediately revealed a look of extreme interest. I won't say much. Anyway, I do have a batch of secret manuals. I will pick out a portion and bring it to you. Ren Baqian waved his hand. He didn't want to talk too much about Dayo. We also need the corpses of experts. The samples are still too few, Yang Sun immediately said. Chapter 549. Sir, you are back. The 6 of them were pleasantly surprised to see Ren Baqian. Where is Her Majesty? It's Big Boss and Second Boss. Her Majesty has conquered Shuiyang City and is busy suppressing the rebellion, Ren Baqian corrected them. It's a pity that we can't follow Her Majesty into battle. They felt that it was a pity that drinking here wasn't as fun as chopping people's heads off. Your teacher has gone back for the new year. You guys can stay here for the time being. 2 of you come with me, Ren Baqian instructed as he went to change his clothes. He didn't go back for the new year last year, and it was time for him to go back this year. The main thing was to bring back the improved martial arts manual that he had just obtained. Ren Baqian first called Ren Wanyan to confirm that he would be at home for the next 2 days before leaving with the 2 winged cavalry warriors. Although it wasn't really necessary, these winged cavalry warriors still wanted to see the outside world. After all, they weren't brought here just to be gatekeepers. It had to be said that bringing 2 winged cavalry warriors out would reduce the number of people turning their heads, and the deterrent effect of going out with the Empress. While they were on the plain, the 2 winged cavalry warriors kept looking out of the window. Their eyes were wide open, and they kept muttering, "Oh, oh, ah, oh." Looking at the stewardess' expression as if she had been molested, Ren Baqian wanted to throw these 2 shameful fellows out of the plane. After spending some time returning to the neighborhood, Ren Baqian sighed for a long time downstairs. When he went upstairs and knocked on the door, he was surprised to find a family that he didn't know at all. The other party was also at a loss when they saw Ren Baqian, and the two winged cavalry warriors who had the word thugs written on their faces. Rinpoche only found out after a call that his family had moved and rented out their old house without him knowing. Dad, tell me the truth. Am I your biological son? Rinpoche asked in astonishment. You finally asked this question. Rinpoche's father lamented on the other end of the phone. The little baby that I got for topping up my phone has grown up in the blink of an eye. Dad, does my mom know that you are so mischievous? Rinpoche grinned. After asking for the address, Rinpoche finally found his house after more than half an hour. You still know to come back. Where's your girlfriend? Is he here yet? When Mama Rin opened the door and saw him, two of her fingers stuck to his ear. She even stretched out her head to look for the lady in red that she had seen previously. In the end, she saw two bears and was immediately shocked. Huh? Who are they? Well, I'm considered a bodyguard, Rinpoche replied casually and turned around to greet them. Come in. Mama Rin brought him into the room and asked softly, Where did you find these two people? Can't you find two decent ones? These two don't look like decent people. Don't worry. Although he looked a little fierce, he wasn't a bad person. They used to be soldiers. Oh, only then did Mama Rin feel relieved. Rinpoche fooled his mother and went out to greet his father and younger brother. He got the two uneasy winged cavalry warriors to sit down at the side before he sized up the house. The house was on the 5th floor of a newly built district. It was a large flat with 4 bedrooms, 2 living rooms and 2 bathrooms. It was about 200 square meters. The decorations were simple, mainly in dark colors, looking a little old-fashioned. However, the house that his parents lived in was whatever they wanted. Mom, Dad, Wan Yin, I have something to tell you, Rinpoche said after looking around the house. Why? Are you getting married? Papa Rin asked in surprise. I'm the last to know? Rinpoche was speechless. Let's get down to business. When are you getting married? Mama Rin couldn't help but ask. In another 2 or 3 years, Rinpoche said helplessly. In another 2 or 3 years, your classmate's son will be in primary school. We won't be able to help you take care of the child. Mama Rin said sourly. Rinpoche paused for a moment. He really did have a classmate who got married after graduating from junior high school. His child should be around 7 or 8 years old now. Even if his son reached the Earth will level in 1 more year in Dayo, married the Empress, and had a child, it would still take at least 2 years. That would be 6 years on Earth. Let's get down to business. Rinpoche threw these thoughts to the side. Papa Rin and Mama Rin could finally sit on the sofa and listen to him. Now the nation has sorted out the ancient books and researched the cultivation method. Although it can't make you immortal, it can strengthen your body and prolong your life. I have practiced Tai Chi, and your mom can do square dance. Papa Rin looked like he thought Rinpoche was going to say something, but it turned out to be this. It's not the same. Rinpoche shook his head. He raised his hand and smashed the coffee table in front of him, smashing it into pieces. Papa Rin, Mama Rin, and Rin Wanyan were shocked. This coffee table was made of solid wood that was 6 centimeters thick. Even if it was smashed with a hammer, it would have to be a large one. Rinpoche actually smashed it with his bare hands. That's basically it. Strengthen your body and prolong your life. At a certain stage of cultivation, it's entirely possible to live to 150 or even 200 years old, Rinpoche said. You're not bluffing? The 3 of them still felt that it was a little unbelievable. They knew what Rinpoche was like originally. However, in recent years, he had become a little unrecognizable. Being rich was one thing, and it was still within an acceptable range. However, the scene in front of them was a little scary. This slap on the coffee table. If it were to be slapped on a person, it was scary just thinking about it. If this kind of martial arts is spread, it will have a great impact on society, so it won't be made public for the time being. However, some people have already started to practice it, especially in the military and some special departments. So what you mean is, I brought it back for you to practice. Don't you have any confidentiality rules? If others find out, you don't have to worry about this. However, you can only practice it yourself and can't pass it on to others. Don't leak it, including my 7 aunts and 8 aunts. If it gets out, I will be in some trouble, Rinpoche said faintly. The nation wasn't ready and wouldn't make it public for a while. Even if Yongsun didn't inform him, he wouldn't do this. The more people who knew about it, the higher the possibility of it getting out. It wouldn't be good if it caused trouble. After a while, the 3 of them finally digested what Rinpoche said. He then took out a USB and plugged it into the TV for them to watch. At the same time, he also explained some of the things that needed attention. In addition, he would get people to send some food regularly in the future. After all, martial arts didn't only require practice, but also nourishment. If there wasn't a suitable method to nourish the body, it would easily cause irreparable damage to the body. Fortunately, this was relatively simple for him. He just needed to bring back some meat and medicinal herbs from Dayo regularly. After staying at home for 2 days, Rinpoche bought 2 plane tickets for the 2 winged cavalry warriors, and threw them a sum of money, so that they could find a way to go back themselves. Whether they took a plane or chartered a car, Rinpoche didn't care. He wasn't a nanny, and these winged cavalry warriors had to learn to do things independently in this world. As for himself, he collected 1,500 grenades and 300 flash bombs from somewhere in the city, before returning to Dayo. Chapter 550. After the Aboriginals occupied Shuiyang City, the people in the city experienced despair at the beginning. After Rinpoche got people to shout throughout the city, they gradually calmed down after a few days. Although they were still afraid and at a loss for the future, it seemed that these barbarians didn't kill anyone on sight as they had previously thought. Although there were still people who were captured and beheaded from time to time, these were the people who had hidden rebel soldiers in their homes. The ordinary people weren't affected much. This made many people heave a sigh of relief. They prayed every day that such days would continue, and that these barbarians wouldn't become beastly and raise their butcher knives against the commoners. If it wasn't for the fact that they couldn't leave the city, many people would have wanted to leave the city to hide. After 3 to 5 months, they would be able to see clearly. Sir, there are a total of 73 households harboring rebel soldiers, and 6 of them are wealthy families. Zwelung handed a list to Rinpoche. Rinpoche took it, scanned it, raised his head and asked, "Why do you think this is so?" "Sir, I don't understand." Zwelung lowered his head. "Why do you think these people risk their lives to shelter the rebel soldiers? Unless they are close relatives, it would be very difficult for them to do so, right? But if they were close relatives, why did these hidden rebel soldiers stay there even though they knew that doing so would implicate those who protected them? Some of them would rather risk their lives to protect others, but the others would rather help their own people risk their lives than give up their lives. From this point, it seems that both parties have the same goal. However, I'm very curious about what these 2 types of people are thinking," Rinpoche said faintly. Zwelung opened his mouth. At first, he thought that this was an easy question to answer. Because they were close relatives, they were sheltered. But as Rinpoche spoke, he began to be puzzled. Right, why would those people risk their lives and not give up their lives to come out? "Sir, I also don't understand," Zwelung said. "Is that so? One side is thinking for the people of the other side, while the other side is only thinking for themselves." Rinpoche laughed. "Let's go and take a look." Rinpoche stood up. A moment later, Rinpoche left the residence with 20 bodyguards. There were a few baihu and dozens of tiki leading the way in front. Among them, there was even a strong man who was familiar with this place. "Zwelung!" Rinpoche shouted. Zwelung immediately steered his mount to the back of Rinpoche. "Have you arranged everything? Arrest them one by one. Don't let some of them run away after hearing the news," Rinpoche said. "Sir, everything has been arranged. They won't be able to escape," Zwelung immediately guaranteed. "Lead the way." The horses galloped on the stone road, and the crisp sound of hooves could be heard. A few commoners who had no choice but to come out of their houses saw them from afar, and they shivered and hid at the side. Renbachian sat on his mount and looked to both sides. Occasionally he could see figures appearing by the window or the door, looking at them with fear. The feeling of being feared could not be said to be good or bad. There wasn't much sense of accomplishment, but it wasn't too disgusting either. After walking for an hour in the city, they arrived at a civilian area and stopped in front of an alley. The Baihu led the tiki and rushed into the alley. Finally, they smashed open the doors of each house. The noise and 2 screams could be heard from afar. After a while, 4 people were escorted in front of Renbachian. A few of them stayed behind to guard the place while the others went straight into the distance to continue the arrest. 2 of them looked to be in their 40s. They were a man and a woman in tattered clothes, and they gave off the vibe of old age. Generally, people like them looked much older than they actually were. Life had already dragged them down. The other 2 were 16 or 17 years old youths who were full of youthful vigor. At this moment, the 4 of them had a knife on their necks. They looked up at Renbachian with fear. Many people in the surrounding houses were spying on them in the dark. They were like rats in the sewers and didn't dare to show their heads. "Sir, spare us, sir." Renbachian ignored the cries of the people below him, turned around, and asked Zwileng, "Which one is the rebel?" "The 2 younger ones." Zwileng replied after turning around and asking a few questions. "A few days ago, I sent someone to shout. Did you all hear it? Why are you harboring the rebel?" Renbachian looked down at them from his mount and asked, "Sir, spare us. Xiaoxi is immature and has never done anything bad." The middle-aged man and woman immediately begged for mercy. I said, "Why are you harboring the rebel?" Renbachian repeated, "That's our child." The 2 of them immediately fell to the ground and cried, "Is Xiaoxi your child? What about the other one?" Renbachian asked softly. It was natural for parents to protect their children, but unfortunately, this child didn't live up to expectations. The 2 of them were so overwhelmed with fear that they couldn't make a sound. After being reminded by the knife on their necks, they cried and said, "He was the one who brought him back. Who's Xiaoxi?" Renbachian looked down at the 2 young men. Did you hear what I sent someone to shout?" Renbachian asked. The young man was terrified. His body trembled, and he couldn't say a word. "Tell him that he has to answer what I said," Renbachian said. One of the tiki immediately kicked Xiaoxi, causing him to spit out a mouthful of blood. "Did you hear that?" Yes. Yes. Why aren't you coming out?" When you joined the rebel army, you were already prepared to die. Why would you rather drag your family of 3 to death than come out? Speak. Following Renbachian's shout, the young man's head was hit by the hilt of the knife again, and his head was bleeding. "I'm scared. Is this the rebel army? Is this the so-called rebel army?" Renbachian chuckled, and his voice was full of mockery. "When you were bewitched by others, you became hot-blooded and wanted to shed your blood for the people of the world. However, when things came to a head, you would rather drag your entire family to death and even bring along a good comrade? It seems like you're quite loyal, but the price is the lives of your parents. If you want to kill me, then kill me," the other young man roared angrily. "Well, you're very strong-willed. If you were strong-willed, you would have died in battle long ago. At the very least, you should have committed suicide in their house. They would then drag your body out and say that a rebel army broke into their house and killed you. This way, you might have been able to escape with your life. However, you didn't do that. Instead, you retreated at the critical moment and enjoyed the protection that others gave you at the cost of their lives." Renbachian's face was full of sarcasm. "You evil ghost. Evil ghost." The young man couldn't bear the meaning behind Renbachian's words and frantically tried to pounce on Renbachian. However, he was stepped on by someone. Renbachian raised his head and asked, "Did you see what kind of people these people are?" "I saw them, sir. Selfish, cowardly, and ignorant. Such people are the rebels." Renbachian chuckled. Like a demon, his voice was full of malice and mockery and spread to the ears of the surrounding people who were covering their mouths and peeping carefully. "Kill them," Renbachian said coldly after laughing. A few weapons were immediately inserted into the bodies of these people. "Let's go and take a look at the next one," Renbachian said. The group of people left on their mounts. After a long time, some people came out of their houses to look at the corpses lying in a pool of blood. All of them looked dejected. After spending half a day, Runbachyan had seen the same show 7 or 8 times. There were various reasons, but the final result was the same. Runbachyan finally lost interest and went back with the guards, leaving the people from the rear guard commandery to continue the arrest. On the way, the guard scratched his head and said, "Sir, I still don't understand why you did this. You actually know how to use your brain to think about why?" Runbachyan turned his head and looked at the guard in surprise. "I always feel that people can't understand the way you do things, and it's the same this time. I thought about it and really didn't expect it," the guard said. "Very good. Knowing how to use your brain is the first step for you to evolve from a monkey to a human," Runbachyan praised. "Monkey." The guard scratched his head and didn't know what relationship he had with monkeys. "Of course," Runbachyan then slowly said. "On the one hand, I'm really curious. On the other hand, I also wanted to make an example out of these people. At the same time, I wanted to expose their hearts to others. This way, some people will think twice before doing something stupid again, and see if it's worth it." You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.